I'm reading the preamble. So Manhattan Community Board 4 has a hybrid meeting policy. So welcome to the Housing, Health and Human Services Committee meeting for June. Board members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability or an extraordinary circumstance. Excused members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually. We do happen to have one of our committee members who is participating virtually. Members who are joining via Zoom must leave their cameras on. The meeting is being streamed live on our YouTube channel. A transcript is being recorded and our hybrid policy can be found on our website. So I will turn it over to the co-chair, the committee, Joe Restucci.
Hi, my name is Joe Restucci. I'm the co-chair, Housing, Health, Human Services Committee, Committee Board 4. We'll go around the room and do some intros and talk about our agenda.
Rachel Lee, member.
JD member.
Katie Savage, member.
Paul Items, public member. Pete Diaz, member.
Kevin Collins, member.
Amy Stokes, member.
Dolores Rubin.
Thanks, everybody.
And online,
Oh, online. sorry.
Hector Vasquez, member.
So tonight we have three items on our agenda. And I want to just note that we're going to swap 1 and 2. So we're going to talk about the charter revision report first. That I want everybody to be very alive and wait for that. And then into our affordable housing plan revisions. I also want to note for committee members that the revisions are pretty much the same as we talked about our last meeting. However, we did go to land use did take a position and send a memo to this committee. And those changes have been incorporated into the report. We're going to go over those tonight. But the items that you haven't saw for the first time in the Dropbox are not in the section of all the slides of the projects, but are also in the narrative. Now I'm going to go through those tonight so we can look at them and really ask committee members to look at them further to amplify them, because we have not shown that portion in those revisions yet. So given that, and then the other thing is we have an update from Rachel about the CHHC admin.
Yep, if required.
Right, if required, well,
If requested.
I think
You guys are here.
you should as well.
Sure, I offer. All right now.
Yeah, that's Susie.
Sure, so the update is regarding the CHBC. As you might remember, we produced a letter reflecting the tenants' concerns brought to us through the last meeting. And the update piece is right before our last May meeting, there was a letter by the tenants to the elected officials, CCing MCB4, basically kind of reiterating their concerns and also, providing their take on MCB4's involvement with the issue up until that point. So in response to that, what we have done is we shared our letter, the thoroughly drafted letter that everyone provided input on, that provides our timeline and our summary of the issues, as well as kind of summaries of our site visits and our proposed solutions and next steps, which I think adequately captures our involvement on the issue objectively so. So we sent that to the elected officials with a cover letter offering our full perspective if the elected officials would like to meet with us and hear our statements.
so who wrote the response letter?
So the response letter wasn't a letter, it was really, I believe Jesse or Jessica sent an email to the electeds copying our committee letter.
So we had an administrative response.
Yes, administrative response. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Was there any response to the?
Not that I'm aware of, I believe this happened fairly quickly, so our letter to CHBC actually was sent May 27th. Right?
And is there been a response to that?
I don't think we have yet, right, so I'm just a messenger today, I don't know if there have been communication as of today or, up until that point, but. Yeah, that is the latest, greatest, as I understand it, and at our May meeting, as you remember, MCB4 promised to follow up with CHBC on any further developments, so yeah, that is how I understand the news.
Thank you for the update.
Just want to know for the record that the executive director of Fulton Housing, I'm conflicted out. And Maria not being here, that's why Reg was reporting on the matter.
And on that point, I will say there was a point made in the tenant's letter to the elected officials about that conflict of interest. And I believe we have adequately addressed it through, both with a written letter and also Maria, as you might recall, I mean, several announcements and reminders, both at the community level and the full board about Joe recusing himself and, his position. So again, I think we have offered ourselves to the elected officials and the public for any further evidence and testament to our objectivity and involvement with it, and I think we've done our share of the duty as community board to try and adequately address the tenants' concerns.
I'd like to do a quick report on our new old business, and that's the additional HHHS committee. Nellie, have you settled on that date already for the second meeting in June?
No, I still need responses from a few members.
Could you just refresh the members as to what two dates are being considered? We're having a special meeting just about Chelsea NYCHA in June. Did you refresh the members that information?
The choice is between the 25th or the 26th. If you could please
So-
respond to my email and let me know which date everyone is available.
Yeah, so given everybody's here, I want to run the table, so get some response really quick for Nellie. 25th or 26th?
I told Nelly I'm only available the 25th.
Excellent.
I respond to Nelly both days, okay.
Okay, Pete?
25th.
Paul?
Prefer 25th.
Hold on, you guys are going way too fast.
I know, but Nellie, it's okay, because it's on YouTube.
It's recorded.
Oh,
25th is
okay.
currently the most popular option, 25th
But we got
Wednesday.
to Travis.
Only it's one.
Okay,
26th, but can be available 25th.
great.
Neither.
Both.
Both,
No idea.
no idea, okay.
But it seems like.
Online, Hector?
I can't commit right now.
Okay.
Roberta?
Gilbert?
Likely good for both.
Great. So Nellie, we moved that along a little bit, so hopefully by the end of this week, or maybe Monday of next week, we can settle it. And we'll get that date published, everybody knows what we're doing. The meeting will be held, Nellie, is it a Fulton or a Hudson Guild?
To be determined.
To be determined.
And it sounds like we have a general sense, I mean, two of us are only available on the 25th.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it sounds like nobody was available on the 25th.
Somebody was on the fifth.
Yeah.
It's not like the 25th, so Nellie, given the plurality in the room, people may have commented earlier. Let's say, set it today for the 25th, people can mark their calendars, we can move ahead, okay?
With special thanks to Katie for being flexible
Yes.
for everyone.
And on normal time.
Yes. Yes. Just be prepared, it will be about Chelsea NYCHA, it will be loud. I'll say that.
Is it just commit, or, I mean, it's a public meeting, so the public will
It's
be.
a public meeting, and it is specifically to continue our discussion we started 2 months ago.
They won't be here, but.
Yeah, we need a large.
No.
It'll be at Hudson Guild or Fulton. No, we are, it'll be at one of the campuses,
Something with.
and it'll be a large room with air conditioning.
Oh, hold on.
What's the format?
It is gonna be discussion as we had at our last meeting, sorry.
David Morocco.
David, 1 second, I'll answer the question to, Kevin first. We're gonna be talking about moving ahead, and it's specifically, if you note here, developing a community board position on Chelsea NYCHA, which has been asked over and over of this committee and this board to come up with a position.
So it's a housing committee, not Chelsea.
This is the housing committee,
So,
So you coming up with the community board position for Chelsea NYCHA.
Yes.
On the project.
On that particular project, so it's a special.
On the proposed project.
Right, okay, so it's
Which
special.
you currently have no.
We have no written position.
Okay.
We have been back and forth about doing this, and that's what we're doing, yes.
Got it, Joe, trying to take this through chronologically. You think that should be before the official meeting with the electeds?
yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Absolutely. Our community board has discussed this for
Years.
a year and a half, 2 years, right?
Right.
Our electeds have their own position. They have stated what their position is. Our community board has not taken a written position.
Well, that meeting with the electeds is with the community board.
It's.
Yes,
Yeah, it's sponsored by
It's
the.
to hear.
It's for the community to give their feedback to the electeds.
and for the electeds to state what their position is and what, so let me just back up for a sec. So also this week on Monday, myself, Jessica, Greg Morris, and Maria and Jesse had a planning meeting for how to handle the town hall. Right? And we did this on the heels of the town hall, and Kevin may report on that in a second. I asked him to do that, and this is a sort of like quick business that we're doing. Tony Simone sponsored a town hall, which became the bit larger side and became Chelsea Night Show. And it was quite chaotic. Thinking about that, we talked about what do we want to do as a community board, how do we handle a town hall? Especially since the elected officials, Tony Simone and Jerry Nadler, were at that town hall, stated they would be at our community board town hall talk just about this. They confirmed their presence there. We talked about specifically what is the format to avoid any chaos in the room. So here are the ideas that we're discussing. Nothing is solidified yet. That we would introduce everybody. We would lay out ground rules as to how people have to comport themselves and what the format of the meeting is. We would have lines for microphones for people to speak. Also, that did not happen at the town hall last weekend. There was people shouting up or putting their hands up. We considered and we're talking if we were going to take some questions in advance, so solicit questions, so we can ask the various elected officials, where are you on this particular item or that particular item, so we get just steady information. We considered the discussion of having the tenant association presidents from both campuses maybe speak initially to present. We're not sure if that makes sense or when that happens in the course of it. But the goal is, number one, to hear the elected officials state why they are supporting this project. They've already said publicly they all support this project. And then to hear from the community, so the elected officials can hear from the issues that they want to address. Now, we know this is a very, very emotional matter. And we do expect there's going to be a lot of back and forth. But our goal is to manage it in a way that it becomes productive, so elected officials hear from the community members as to what their issues are, and vice versa. That they, for the first time in public, because they have never said this in public in a way in a year and a half, 2 years. I support this project because X, Y, or Z. So, Kate, I see physical thoughts.
Yeah, so couple things. So one, you said it, you expect her, the group who met earlier this week expects her to be back and forth, but is that right?
When they're back and forth, I mean, which we were.
Everybody will have an opportunity to speak.
Yes, right.
Yeah, but we're not expecting like the
No.
electeds to respond to every, like, whatever,
Absolutely.
right? Because the goal is to just make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. Okay, so just want to make sure it's not back and forth, because I thought,
So we went back and forth, kind of figure out how to manage
Okay.
it, you know.
got it. So I will say that, I do think. Obviously, you know, you all managing how the town hall's going to go is super important. But I think that managing what the goal of our special meeting is gonna be is super important, and I think advertising it as.
Yep.
This is an opportunity for people to come
Have
tell
input
the
into-
board
Right. What do we-
how you want the board to vote, or what stance you want the board to take. One makes it sound like this shouldn't be a special HHS meeting, this should be a special CB4 meeting.
Or it would go through the.
Well,
So I assume.
Yeah, see, the thing is, that
that's why I just think we should just be super clear. I'm just like, I'm all about like being super specific. I think this should be. This is an invitation to come speak to HHHS. To share your thoughts, as we. Prepare to take a position or whatever, right? Or, you know, we want to hear from you what your priorities are going forward or something. I just think the more specific we can be, the more helpful it can be to everybody. And I think we should just be really careful not to be presenting this as.
I know we laid out and noticed it.
Yeah, and I think we should not be saying, this is what happens that night. Is the position the board is gonna take going forward. Cause.
Well, that is our normal process.
Yes.
It would go to a committee, it goes to a committee, and then it would go to the full board.
Right, but they can,
It has to go back to this committee in July and then go to the full board on July 26th. So Katie's right there.
So we would have this discussion, and then July meeting would be when the committee reflects on that discussion. and comes up with a position,
No,
votes on a letter, and then that letter would go to September.
no,
No,
I mean.
you're at the end of July meeting.
Oh, that's right, the end of July.
Yeah, the reason it's,
No, I
the reason we
understand.
structured this way is because we have the odd time for the July meeting being
Yeah.
later.
Got it.
So we grabbed an end of June discussion. That helps us get the full input. And then we can come back as
July.
JD noted, in our July housing meeting, which will happen, I believe, the week.
July first, I think. was-
July 1st, because we're off the calendar thing, right? And that's great, because it means that we're.
But I completely support what Kevin said, but I think, frankly, I think it would be unusual or surprising, frankly, maybe not most helpful. For our committee to say, we want to hear from you at the end of June. So that we can form an opinion about what to do, and that we are going to form and finalize that opinion. Before the very town hall that our community board is hosting with. I just think that's a sort of
The
weird.
electeds are not driving the process because they've already decided they have supported this plan. That's a hard cold fact. And what has happened is this community board, with a bunch of varying circumstances, has not taken a position for almost 2 years on this.
Right, but it sounds like what you're saying is, hey guys, just as a little aside, it is pointless to show up at the town hall.
No.
They've already made a decision and
Well,
there's.
The community board's decision isn't a
Is it?
large factor. I mean, again, the community board's position is just an advisory position. The elected officials, they really are the ones who have the most say in all of this. So having the tenants, kind of be responsive to them and, giving them feedback has nothing to do with the community board's position. It will help maybe sway or do whatever to the elected's position.
I'm gonna go to Rachel in a second, but I want to make a couple of notes here. We are in an atypical public process. I have never been in a public process where all of our electeds take a position on something prior to going through a public process, all right? That is truly odd. We are in a real public process, finally. And by the way, this is with the agreement with the Chelsea Land Use Committee, that this is being brought to through housing and purpose and talked about how to manage this, right? Where we need to air out now, finally, which we started a month ago. What people's concerns are. What are the things, what are the facts versus the claims versus the facts, what do we want to do here, right? We need to speak openly and honestly about it, right? Now, as you know, at the Chelsea Land Use Committee, there was a discussion and there was an issue that was incorrectly applied about the public meetings law, into executive session, so we corrected that issue. And people began to speak openly and honest about it. This is a public matter and a development that is unique and precedential setting for public housing in the city of New York, happening in our district. It is our time now to form that community response. And I want to differ with Katie. Yes, certain elected officials have a final say, but the whole process is within a political sphere. And we are part of that political discussion and that planning discussion.
But our opinion doesn't really rely on the opinions of the elected.
Correct.
Because it's just one part of the puzzle.
And it's very odd that normally the electeds are relying upon our input during the course of the public process, as opposed to them saying, this is the only way to go and here's where we are.
Yeah,
They're trying to shape
Yeah.
what we do.
But
Yeah.
the recommendation for the town hall was so that the electeds could be in front of their constituents.
Right.
And to face the conversation that they have not faced because they haven't been involved publicly. That was the purpose of the town hall.
Yeah, because people
That's
kept
why-
coming here trying to say that, the community board is responsible for this and making it feel like
Sorry, Rachel didn't.
we have all this power, when really they should be directing those feelings to the elected.
I'm gonna go to Rachel and David Olo.
I think Dolores actually was getting to what I was gonna say, that sounds like, to your point about how we're gonna communicate the purpose of the two meetings, because they sound pretty. As if I were a Nighton resident, I'd be like, why do I have to go to two meetings where I would be voicing my concerns over and over again, which I've been doing for years, right? So it sounds like the June meeting is really our final chance to educate ourselves before we nudge the board into this direction of yes or no.
A recommendation.
Right, a recommendation. So I understand your point, like, how are we gonna communicate, like, why this one? you know? And then the town hall, like the Lord was saying, because we've been on the receiving end of this for so
my God.
long. And then the tenants also have some level of high level of frustration over like, what are the electeds, right? And why are they saying this when we've been voicing?
A lot of it's
There's
very
like
well.
a huge gap in this communication, so I think that's the purpose of the town hall, right? So I don't know, but, you know, they.
David Aloka, followed by Hector.
Yeah, thanks. I just kind of want to echo what Katie said. It almost feels like it should be a CB4 meeting, and I trust that you will do outreach to all of the other members to have this highlighted coming up. I attended the town hall on Saturday, where Tony Simone really just clung to the original electeds line about this project, citing the deplorable conditions, as if they never heard from us that we've never received a shred of evidence that Fulton Elliot Chelsea can't be renovated like all of the other projects under PACT and RAD. He cited the survey again, as discredited as that has been. He cited millionaire outsiders interfering with the process and cited the 1,000 units of affordable housing that would be created, which shows that he's committed already to the rezoning option, which is the option that produces those 1,000 units. I think it's very important to have this upcoming meeting with the residents because we need to be representing them as well as the outside community. And I'm very concerned, especially since we've just submitted comments on the DEIS, that it's going to look like, well, we're complicit with what's going forward because we submitted comments. And at the last full board meeting, Viren Brambad raised concerns about that it would look like we didn't have a problem with the alternatives that the DEIS is promoting when they would all be disastrous for Chelsea. I think it's not a coincidence that very shortly after that, he wasn't reappointed to the board. I'm hopeful that he will be reappointed, but it's clear where this is going. It's like watching a show trial. In the DEIS, the non-rezoning alternative was found feasible, and it produced more public service space for the developments, greater community space, and in some, looking at the medical space and the others, it was more beneficial in terms of that kind of space, and it had far less adverse impact. And yet the rezoning scheme was not dismissed. I mean, we're looking at a process. It's a train going down the tracks to the rezoning option being crowned the winner, and then through ULURP with the support of our electeds. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Hector, you're next.
Honestly, I was at the town hall that Tony Simone and Jerry Nadler had last weekend, and it turned chaotic at the end, unfortunately, because usual suspects came out and were very vocal and disrespectful, and that's a part of the issue that we're having with our meetings as well. And that's what I predict is going to happen in this next town hall, unless we take a firm stand. And there should be repercussions for anybody who gets out of line. I mean, you can only tell somebody so many times that, you know, hey, let somebody be respectful, let somebody speak, let them finish what they're going to say. And they keep getting interrupted and they're not allowed to say their piece. And yet when they go up, they're fine to do whatever they want to do. So honestly, this is one of the reasons that a lot of residents do not show up for these meetings, or they walk out in the middle of these meetings as well, which is not fair because honestly, they feel intimidated. They don't want to deal with this kind of garbage. And why should they? And we're talking about some elderly people here with heart conditions and health issues as well, trying to really make a stand in the community, what they believe is, you know, what they want. And how can they do that where people are just yelling and fighting over each other? So we really need to be firm on what we're going to do with people who are just not following the rules anymore. Because how many meetings are we going to have, and this is just going to get out of control again?
So I just want to note that having been involved in these major Chelsea and ISU meetings before, we will set the rules. And I think there are a number of us who have no problem going out into that audience sector, and you've seen me do it directly, and saying, please be quiet, no, step away. And if anything gets really out of hand, physically, you have seen me put my body in between people, right? So I'm gonna ask for certain members of our committee, any sort of action like that. At our last meeting, when we talked about this, we didn't see that at all. Huh?
Let me guess who.
Yes, yes. Travis, the skinny white guy, in you, okay? So the bottom line is that, honestly, I think we have managed these meetings much better. Certainly than the one that happened last weekend.
So behavioral management aside,
Yes,
so that we can, again, achieve the goal of educating ourselves towards this decision.
right.
Are we going to go in with some list of questions, or how do we make sure
Yeah.
that we're focusing on getting the information, ironing out any confusion we need? Because at this point, really, we've been on the receiving end of,
I'm gonna build upon the document that we put out at our last meeting, sort of a list of items. And what I wanna say here is that I find very, very disturbing, right? We have never been in a position as a community board with this large of a project where we have not yet staked out a formal position deeply into this. That is so out of the ordinary. Any Hudson Yards rezoning, we maybe took like 15 positions before we got to the final one, right? And we built on it. So we put out things that we got information back and went back and forth, or this could happen or that could not happen. Really what's happened is we have been stonewalled for information. And we got, as a community board, into a circular motion of we can't take a position until we have information. Until it finally occurred to us that information was not being put out there in a very deliberate, obvious manner.
Joe, that's one of my concerns. I very much,
JD speaking now, speak a little loud.
I'm sorry, that's one of my concerns. I very much think we should have a position. But what I'm concerned about at that meeting is we're not gonna get information. There's still gonna be stuff that we don't know.
That again,
How can we prepare for that? For instance, I have heard that the demolition project would take 14 years.
yes,
I don't know if people in Chelsea.
it's in the EIS,
It is 14 years.
yes. 10 to 14 years, yes.
So.
And the community has how many elderly folks?
So bottom line is there's a town hall that will be still determined exactly the format with the idea.
Should I give?
I think we're finished, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, but just how can we anticipate that we're gonna be questions, we still don't know the answer?
So I think we need to accept the fact that this entire project has been presented in a way not to give full and clear information.
That's right.
And therefore, when we start with that, we stop trying to say, we can't take a position until we have everything figured out and all this information. And then we have other folks saying, we know everything. Well, we don't, right?
So my position is any position where there's a lack of transparency is the merit in this project.
Oh.
And so that's just my personal position. So if they're unclear on stuff, or they're like trying to play the rigmarole with us, that's a clear sign for me.
I mean, I say, I'll give an example. Hector, at a board meeting on, last night, mentioned that we got this, or Mike Noble said we got information in the package about relocation and we're subject to the uniform. And well, that's a federal guideline. What no one has seen so far is the document for temporary or permanent relocation for Chelsea Nitro. And the fact that we are deep into DEIS and Euler, when that is a key document in any housing redevelopment project, is an absolute problem.
And once again-
But the ULERT,
Huh?
has something been announced?
Deep into Euler, meaning we are preparing the DEIS process and the various scenarios in the DEIS, which then sets off the Euler. I will guarantee you, the moment the DEIS is approved for the legal process, we're gonna get a Euler certification. Because we have no information from behind the scenes, what is happening. We would normally have been sitting down with city planning, our council member, our elected officials, and getting briefed every step along the way.
So how do we respond? Because presumably we're gonna hear the same things at our June meetings that we've heard in lots of our meetings, right? That people are gonna be saying like, we need to go back and have another RFP, that we need to have another survey, that we need to throw out that, you know, they've been acting in bad faith, but all sorts of things. How?
Yeah, can I give a concrete example on just one item, right?
Yeah, but then also just, how do we?
I understand, I'll give you a concrete example. So we were first told that there was a vote here, right? And then we learned after months and months of back and forth, that it was a survey. and that it was not a survey of the majority, it was a minority, but the whole thing, right? One of our simple things that we recommend is, whatever happens here, please have a vote on both campuses. That may be a very simple, straightforward thing, we don't have that flies out lands. Because now that has become a standard process in other NYCHA developments.
Right.
I'm saying, like, I think we should not so much worry about getting it all right, but getting as much right as we know. And then recommending, if we had been part and party of this, part and parcel of this, we would have said, oh, that happened, now do that action. Oh, a relocation agreement? Please produce a relocation agreement for tenant reviews to understand what that means.
Yeah, like I was thinking, like,
Like
you
that.
say to people, like, the purpose of this meeting, we want your top 20, your top whatever.
Right.
Asks.
So we help the residents, the tenants, get the information that they have,
Yeah,
that they're
just like-
unclear on.
Right, like we know everybody's pissed, we're clear on that. Well, like the purpose of this meeting is to hear from people what their top. Pick a number, 15, 20, whatever it is, X. Specific. Requests are, and we are gonna help achieve. To acquire that information or, you know what I mean, like.
But also to say that, here's another good example is, there's clearly a split between the Fulton campus and the Elliot Chelsea campus.
Mhm.
They may take a position, there should,
Decouple.
that this can proceed, this should proceed, but there should be different approaches depending upon what the tenants want each. And that's like it's not like the details of it, but a
Right.
basic thing,
Right.
right? Cause I'm gonna tell you, if in fact one wants it, a full demolition, and one doesn't, God bless.
Yeah, but so we're assuming that. I don't think we're gonna I think we're gonna hear. Lots of different views, and how do we decide, like, okay. These 5 people at this campus are pissed about completely different things, and they want completely, and these 5. And it's just like,
Because we're not in a bean counter mode, we're in a, having lived through this for almost 2-year mode. We can sift through accuracy, truth, fear, the best we can. We can't be perfect in this, I just wanna say we can't be perfect, don't expect perfection, but expect at least. I watched our former chair ensure that we did not take a position for 1.5 years at all. Except we ran into information that was constantly blocked to get to us. That was very frustrating. I've never seen an agency block us information.
I have a bird's eye view question.
Yeah, please.
So from someone who is. An intermediate familiarity level on this. My biggest question is, let's say, I mean, I don't care what the format or the act is. The people who show up will show up, right? And I think there's been one big gap in understanding the tenant's view, which is. What data set, like what survey result is representative of what view? I think that is the biggest mystery to me. You mentioned that conducting another survey, maybe that
No.
will be enough, maybe that won't be.
I don't think we asked for a survey. You know why? Because NYCHA's moved on since this happened.
Not us, but I'm
No,
saying maybe the tenants.
No, but I'm saying. In NYCHA's process, they now actually call for a vote of the tenants.
Fine, vote, survey,
Oh,
whatever.
no, it's very different because NYCHA considers that action.
You mean the phrasing?
Huh?
We had to verbalize what happened.
No, I'm talking the actual thing.
Let's talk about formal bit.
they want formal.
They want a formal vote and they conduct it by some third party.
The residents or not?
NYCHA puts out that we intend to do A, B, or C.
Okay.
You're saying-
You, the residents of this campus, will get a ballot to vote for what you wanna do. And they actually conducted them,
Just not,
and then they
not
follow
here,
them,
not
not
at this.
here.
They haven't done it yet.
In
Oh, you're talking
other.
about another.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
why don't we do this for this one?
Because,
Okay.
because that process didn't exist. I know, I worked on it. That process didn't exist when this happened 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. I'm just saying, we should pull out the information and the process that happens today to help us get to this position, that's all.
Yeah.
Right, and wouldn't that go help us get to the position?
Well, but that's not the only consideration, there's also larger Chelsea.
Right. Okay, you know, what we're doing is now, we're getting people in, we're getting into the debate that's gonna happen on the 25th. But I wanted to open it up for discussion, and thank you, Katie, for like pushing to do this, because getting this, it helps us understand what we should be getting to. Kevin, you have the last word.
Just a friendly thought suggestion. In terms of. Learning by listening, if I understand it chronologically, we're gonna have a special meeting on June 25th to hear from the community, our residents.
Yes, and talk among ourselves,
Then we're gonna meet on July 1st.
yes.
And then we're gonna have the town hall meeting that we asked for with the electeds in the community on July 3rd,
July 9th.
July 9th.
July 9th.
And then this committee, no matter what, out of our July 1st meeting, has to have come up with the rough idea of a draft or position.
I just think there is value in hearing the discussion, whatever it may be in July 9th, between the community and electeds, not that whole different, the whole perspective. I still think if the community is gonna be there, it's gonna be a back and forth with community and electeds. One can learn by listening to that discussion back and forth.
I just don't know if we're gonna hear anything different from what we've
We're not.
heard over and over and over.
Let's talk about logistics. We have a date where the electeds are available and we have a scheduled.
Well, I'm not saying move it.
No, I'm saying, so. Let's do the best. we
See, Kevin, I would say that what you said makes perfect sense. If all of our electeds had said, we haven't taken a position on this yet.
can. Yeah.
However, they said that. So that sort of makes their input move into ours because they just said, we're doing this. And we support it. And by the way, they said, and there is
We didn't give our input.
and they said, there is no other way, which I find truly remarkable. I've never seen.
Okay,
So I want to thank everybody for having.
for one more, when you say our position though, just so we're clear,
Community.
can it be, right, can it be something like you said about our position is to X, Y, and Z?
I would say, let's forge that and get to that meeting on June 25th.
It doesn't have to be like a yes or no, right?
Okay, I'm not gonna say anything about this. Let's talk about it in consensus, right? Because the truth is,
Just up in the air.
not taking a position is the same as taking a position.
Alright,
We have to take a position one way or the other on some form of this.
So there's
David, and I'm gonna give you all of 30 seconds. We're ending this. Thank you.
Okay, regarding a survey by the tenants, I just want to make sure everyone is clear that the original survey was predicated on the idea that it would cost about as much to renovate the existing buildings as to replace them, which has never been true. And NYCHA doesn't even defend that lie anymore. It's close to $1 billion according to their numbers, more likely more than $1 billion. So there's a question as to whether the tenants should be in a position of deciding whether the buildings are demolished and in a position of upzoning Chelsea, which is inextricably linked, thanks to the way NYCHA has set this up. Thank you.
Honestly, everybody in Chelsea, irrespective of where they live, you take a position and that's their right. Okay? And people get misinformation all the time. Our goal is to try to strip it and make it clear and as accessible as possible. That was the last word, but yeah, half.
No, the very, or, so that, at our last meeting, you have that, claims and facts.
Yes,
Would it be possible to have a ton of copies of that printed
Yes.
out and distributed to everyone who attends the 25th meeting?
you can.
So that they
you can
have that,
copies,
they
have
have-
copies, we can also have it online too.
Yeah, cause I think having that information will help kind of set the stage, so we don't keep hearing the repeated
Is that in the Dropbox?
lies.
It was, yeah.
good idea.
But we'll just have to refresh it, you know, whatever.
I just want to say one thing.
Uh-oh.
As far as I'm concerned, and this, is what Rachel was saying, there are three aspects here. There's the tenants, that's the tenants, that's the most important, I think. But there's also greater Chelsea, how that's gonna affect them. And the third thing is public policy. This is demolishing public housing.
Yes,
First time in New York City, I believe.
it is. It-
This is
it-
an experiment.
Of this scale, of this scale.
Of this scale. That is quite something. And it's demolishing public housing to provide housing for private development. There's three big things operating here, and I think it's important that we say something about that on those three.
From the policy level too, not just our own.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a perfect sum up. I'm glad it's on YouTube to guide us going forward.
Thank you, co-chair.
As long as we can hear it.
Well, so let's go now, let's now move to the Charter Commission. Roberta, are you gonna present on this part of it?
I was not explicitly planning on doing
I'll
so, but
do it.
I'm very happy to if it would be helpful.
No, I'll do it and then you can add in and correct me, okay?
Absolutely,
Okay.
that sounds
If you
great.
have more time to spend with this than I have, okay? So, can everybody either go to your laptops or there are copies on the table? Does everyone look at this summary from the Charter Commission? Yes, no? Okay, if you haven't, I'm gonna pass it across the table.
I'll try this better this time, we'll see if I.
And then, Nellie, can you send a few more copies to the printer? Paul, maybe a copy in the printer. Yes. So, First, let's just talk about the Charter Commission in general, right? I'm gonna characterize things from my understanding. This is held by the mayor. The mayor is looking to, in a similar way that Trump believes that strong executives in charge of the world, this mayor believes that the mayor should be in charge of the city of New York and not our legislation. And that is a thing and bluntly, what's happening is that in the name of housing and affordable housing, the mayor is seeking to grab power here. And I think a lot of people know that, and I want to talk about the story behind the story. So therefore, I believe in this Charter Revision Commission, there are a lot of good or things that should be considered. Then there are certain moves that are all about just making the executive do something and taking away legislative review. The legislative review not only includes community boards, it includes the city council. So that's a disturbing fact. And I did hear something yesterday. I watched the I heard something yesterday in the mayoral debate. One candidate said the city council is a block on everything, which is not true. You know, the city council is a place where things get sifted out, worked out, and the public approval process actually makes. When we elect people, we don't elect just the mayor, we elect 51 council members, and they have different points of view and visions and whatever, and this all helps because it brings the locality into the discussion.
I thought we were the ball.
So there are many things here that make sense, others that are not, right? So I'd like to go through this, going to this page 39 first of the document. And here are the questions that are raised. Should ULURP be amended to reduce the application burden for small projects such as those small scale residential buildings? So question number one is, what is small scale, right? Because this gets,
50 units.
yeah, this gets me a little bit crazy. And also it's relative to a neighborhood. If you live in Bay Ridge, small scale, maybe 3 units or 2 units, right? But if you live here in Hell's Kitchen, that could be 30 apartments, whatever, I don't know. Some of the things that are recommended are very broad-based and they make it sound as if, oh, this is really reasonable to do X, Y, or Z, and they lack definition. Interestingly, City Council Land Use has requested a meeting with Community Board 4 to get our input into the charter revision. I think I'm happy with that, and they made the request, we didn't make the request.
And when will that be?
Do not know. You know, this just happened like Monday or something, right?
Monday at 5 o'clock.
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Harris. Okay, Jake, our land use chair knows more than I know, okay? All I saw was an email saying we'd like to meet with you and now it's been scheduled, okay?
It's just, as I understand it, Katie, it was Paris at the city council planning.
Harris Schroeder, Director of City
That
Council.
wanted to meet with the land use chairs, I believe the housing. Not to get our input, because we have not voted on the report, but just to give us a heads up. That was my understanding, Jeff.
Good, I don't know. I saw an email saying like.
It's not to respond, but we really haven't voted here.
But let me just note broadly, there is now in response to this charter commission, another charter review commission by the city council. So we have dueling charter commissions. However, that one, maybe you should know, has no impact because they'll make recommendations, but the mayor charters commission will put something on the ballot in November of
It's
this year.
also true if the mayor of the charter commission, it supersedes the city council charter commission, they both can't be on the ballot at the same time.
That's correct,
Mayor's fit for.
right.
Yes.
So the point of it is, this is politics. So the city council, the other charter commissions make recommendations, and there's gonna be a dueling public discussion back and forth. So here we are today, looking at this for the first time, and there are a lot of things that have merit in here. I just pulled the housing portion, now not the other stuff. And to start talking about what our qualifications or thoughts are, right? Yes, Kips, Dolores.
I have a question about the formation of this ballot measure.
Yes,
What is required to actually get it on the ballot, and has it already happened that it will definitely be on the ballot?
when there's a charter commission, it goes on the ballot automatically after the commission makes a recommendation.
So it's a done deal that it'll be on the ballot?
Yes,
That something will be on the ballot. Nothing that,
no, not the report. There will be a charter
That's
revision
what I was asking.
on the ballot.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
And we are in the process now, and that's why Roberta's also probably engaged with this. The first public hearing on this, right, was July 7th, Roberta? Roberta?
Sorry, that is not the first public hearing. That'll actually be, I believe, the last public input session for this, but this is the Manhattan portion. So the preliminary report has already been put forward, and we're now engaging with that preliminary report, and that'll be the final formal borough-based input session for this based on this report.
Okay.
So irrespective, we have to get some comment in some way, somehow, right, on this. So, yes,
My overarching start with this is to try to understand what specifically affects us on Ward 4 and what affects the city. Because some of the stuff, as you point out, might be good for the city, but might not be good for us. So as we go through it, I think it's very important to kind of distinguish. And as you point out, this first one, which says small scale, that's vague.
right. So I'm gonna note today as we go through this, to raise the questions and then begin to say, what would we out affecting us should be, right? So should there be a faster procedure to expedite small projects? I would think most people in our community would say yes, but what are the details of that? And what is a small project, correct?
Right.
So just quickly, thoughts about, for our community's point of view, nobody else's, what is a small project? Less than 10 apartments, for example?
Probably.
I'm just
I
throwing
mean,
this one out there for
They
discussion.
don't less than 10 or 20.
I don't think that it can only be about the number of
Units?
units. It could be the price of the project. It could be the actual size of the building. You know,
Square footage.
there's too many variables there that.
I could see, yeah, like by residential square footage, because you could have a building that has like, 4 3-bedroom apartments, or it has 12 1-bedroom apartments.
And also rental versus condo. I mean, there's so many different things that can.
So let me ask you a broad question. This second bullet that says, should there be a streamlined approval process for 100% affordable projects?
Yes.
That's great.
Do we want to link those together though?
I think-
Because there can be there can be an affordable project that is 250 apartments, folks.
I think that that's the same problem.
Well,
There's
We
too
don't have
many
enough
variables, there's too many variables.
right, we're never gonna try to forget the nuance here. We're at the high 30,000 foot level, what you're talking about is a land use review. I'm talking about.
Throw a flag on the play real quick.
What?
He wants to throw a flag.
Let's throw a flag on the So, okay, he's proposing these revisions. What's wrong with the current process?
He feels it's unfriendly to development and it makes it unnecessary hurdle.
And
If
too
I
long.
may, I would also
Yes,
just
sure.
add
Go
that
ahead,
there
yes.
is a
Jump in.
report specifically about what these problems are. So what they're stating, or what they stated in this report, is that there is a challenge to developing, for example, small scale projects because the cost of a land use application is sufficiently high that it only makes sense for developers to file when they are going undertaking a zoning change that is something like 40% greater than what is already existing there. And to that point, they have only found like one instance in the past, I don't know, it was like maybe decade or 20 years in which a developer had sought a rezoning that was on that smaller scale. So it seems like there's a mismatch. There's some desire to create these projects. And the question is, well, how can we make it so that these projects that people I think would like to see, how do we make those possible? And so that is the answer to the question. It's not, I do understand like they might be developer friendly, but the question that they're trying to answer is there's a type of development that either we want to see or members of the public wanted to see, and we were seeing obstacles to those. And so we're looking at, can we reduce some of those obstacles? And I guess our task here is, what are the problems with some of the options to reducing those obstacles?
So a quick question to come back to the committee, Roberta, to you. What do you believe small scale should be defined as a general idea, 30,000 feet, not the specifics, folks?
It may be neighborhood dependent, though the actual report had mentioned 6 or 8 units in at least a number of places. So it might be something of that nature, but it could also be, relative to the building stock around. And so it might be contextually different in Manhattan than it is in Staten Island, for example.
So therefore, a position we could stake out is talk about relative, contextual, something like that. Because it's not gonna, the point of it is, it's not the same for every location. All right? And we need to have some sort of standard that creates, something that creates a standard that says what small is. Because if you're in the Upper East Side, you don't want a rezoning for half a block, say, oh, it's only gonna be a 50% increase in the zone, like, that should not be subject to, to Euler. Travis?
I'm gonna say this, but I'm trying
Kevin
to.
had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Kevin.
I think Katie,
Okay,
Oh,
sorry.
I think Katie was,
No,
I think
I had it first.
I think Katie was first.
So it sounds like the big issue is cost. That the cost for the application is the same regardless of the
Correct.
size of the project.
Yes.
Why can't we pin the cost of the application to the
Thank you.
size of the project?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then everyone is on an equitable playing field and we're not doing this nonsense.
Oh,
So to be clear about the cost element is not just application fees. It is what the report describes as process costs, so costs that are associated with undertaking the process of going to a community board, hiring lawyers, going to council, lobbyists, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's the infrastructure there.
But Roberta, I think Katie's point is still valid because again, like we have small business services, like we go ahead and we provide incubators for certain types of industries in the city. The city actually can subsidize some of these processes. And if we define small scale as a first-time developer, someone is doing a very small project, et cetera, and they go through a city program, you can still accomplish reducing their costs and creating that equity around, so it's not just the big developers, without changing the public process.
Right, so Roberta's point is, it's not the application fees, it's the cost of the professionals to put that project together, right? So,
And thank you.
what?
You're gonna have to pay for all those fees regardless.
You're gonna have to hire the attorney anyway, you're gonna have to do all that stuff anyway.
They're saying the time that it takes.
No, let me try to put it in perspective, no, you hire X attorney for something minor.
For this.
And Y attorney for something like this. So that's a different level. Maybe we want to say there should be some sort of streamlined process to cut the number of requirements for this small scale thing. So it's not on top of the small scale property developer, right? Because it's not just the fee, it's the things around it.
So what is the proof that these costs are the deterrent to small projects? And how do we know that developers are just aren't inherently into bigger projects here in New York because of these bigger bang for your buck? Where's the evidence that something needs to occur?
I agree with that.
Well, it's what Katie said, what Roberta mentioned about the, like, looking back in 10 years, whatever the hell it was.
But so that evidence indicates that there's a lack of applications for small projects. It doesn't indicate why there's a lack of application for small projects. So my concern still relies on the fact that I have no information that tells me what is the actual deterrent. We're assuming that the deterrent is cost. We don't have any knowledge of this.
So
I'm gonna push back on that just a little bit, and I'm sorry to interrupt you in any way. And the only reason I am going to is because we do have dozens of pieces of testimony that informed the report that they made. So yes, you would have to take people at their words, but this is coming from a series of testimony provided by people who are trying to create these types of projects.
Okay, Kevin?
I understand the concern of this aspect of it, but I'd be equally, if not more concerned on the next bullet point. Should there be a fast procedure to expedite small projects? If we're talking about your the steps, right? Community board,
Right.
borough president, DCP, city council, the mayor, and there's X number of days for each. Community board volunteers. Where are they gonna pick up the days? In other words, who's gonna decrease their days to review this substantively, procedurally, and be able to respond?
I will tell you that I believe this recommendation speaks to eliminating public review whatsoever.
So I'd be more concerned about that bullet point than about 10,000 feet, 8,000 feet, 12,000, with all due respect. Because I read that as cutting somebody down, if not cutting somebody out.
It is cutting someone out, that's the
Well,
purpose.
who do you think's gonna be cut out?
I would say the borough president and committee board.
So it sounds like we already have a few responses and suggestions. One, which is to think of some mechanisms the city can provide to create equity around applications so that the overall costs are more equal. Right, that could be either providing special training, maybe it's pro bono type legal aid, depending on if somebody qualifies, but we suggested something there. I'm sure what I hear.
Similar in the SBS model.
And right, like it's yes, and the other thing is about speaking about, we're cutting out the time, the next bullet point, reducing. I think one of the things is if the time is money is the argument. And we can solve for that, then that is not a problem, the time period. But if they're saying overall, the time just takes too long from the moment that you wanna certify to the moment you can put shovels into the ground. There can be some recommendations that doesn't cut out the public process, but maybe can overlap. I don't know if that's even a good idea, but I'm just saying.
That's one of the proposals to make. Borough president.
We're not there yet, though.
Right, you can overlap, but that has to be, we need to be more thoughtful about what makes the most sense that you overlap, right?
Exactly.
Which part of the process, overlapping the community board and the borough president, I would say just from this board's experience. The board having 60 days, getting all that input from all of the community, plus also having that time to communicate with the developer and tweak things. Then comes up with a really solid recommendation that historically has been adopted by a borough president. So just keeping that in mind.
We have our voting process, which, how do you collapse?
I'm not saying we
It's not
collapse,
saying we
I'm
collapse,
not
it's not
saying we
recommended
collapse
collapse.
our portion. But historically, the borough president has followed what the community board has recommended. It's been very rare in Joe's tenure, which is a century on the community board, that the borough president has not taken our recommendation.
Before I go to Katie on this Roberta question, you have the 100% of the streamlined process, 100% affordable. That's a sub bullet to the small projects, or is that on its own?
Yes, that's a sub bullet to the small projects.
Right,
And
so-
yeah,
So clarity, folks, we're talking about, I think we would mostly agree if it's a small project, wherever that's defined, that a streamlined process for a small 100% affordable makes sense. We're not talking about a 250 unit affordable, that gets me totally nervous, because people
That's
will
right.
come in.
No, well, this, yeah,
No, but it says specifically small.
but we don't.
We haven't defined it.
Well, I know, but we're gonna respond, come with some ideas, all right, Katie?
I was just gonna say that I think we've seen here in New York and around the country that, process has gotten in the way of a lot of affordable housing. And, I
But
think,
not in our district.
well,
What, repeat that again, what size?
sorry, my mouth.
Process has gotten away with affordable housing, process.
Processes can be a problem, and so I think that if something is small and it's 100% affordable. We should provide that incentive to developers, like, guess what? You do get the easy pass or the fast lane.
Right.
If you're doing 100% affordable in a small.
I don't know what small means.
I know, but
You're
JD,
not gonna build 6 unit affordable.
yes, JD, there are 6 unit affordable projects being built in various districts in the city, correct?
Really?
Yes,
Outer boroughs.
outer boroughs. The question is, Roberta, do those 6 unit projects related to Euler?
in some cases they do. It depends on what the underlying zoning is. But I think
Right.
part of their concern, and this was a huge conversation in City of Yes, is in very low density districts, and not this one, you undertaking that process is pretty onerous, and often the communities are very hostile. So this is a potential manner to allow those projects to move forward.
So
Through that.
let's try to conclude this discussion that we want this small defined as we go through it, right? And then if it's 100% affordable in the small universe, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The next one is,
Versus we define, so that How different small for.
Correct. I think the idea that it's contextually small is the issue, right?
Right, and 100 units could be small in Manhattan.
Right, but again, this may be, and we may find out as we delve into it further, that this is really angled toward just the 6 to 8 units or 10 units, and that's fine, okay? So you let me amend this, so community board and borough president reviewing the same 60-day timeframe.
I know that word.
It's not just, it's amending it, it's changing the ULERP time clock. I really believe this is not a bad idea in general, but it's another way the mayor to take another bit of influence or power from a borough president. So it's about, that's not the board.
My question here is, does it really take power away from the borough president? If it is consecutive, it just means the borough president needs to actually work.
Not consecutive,
Overlap.
Concurrent.
Concurrent, right, sorry. It would mean that the borough president, instead of waiting for us to just hand it to them, has to be part of the process, and that might not be a bad thing.
I mean, the borough president's time period is another 30 days, so it's not that bad to think about.
I just wonder, like, I don't know, maybe this is me being paranoid about sneaky people, but.
I think you're ready.
Could you game it? So that if you wanted to propose something, that you proposed it like 5 days before our full board.
Maybe.
And then, which basically means we only have 1 month to look at it and go to full board because the 60 days will have expired before our next full board. Do you know what I mean?
You read my mind.
Yeah.
When Kevin mentioned, there were city volunteers, I was like, so let's map out the schedule.
Yeah.
And so we all have full-time jobs, we all have things going on, this is their full-time job.
Yeah.
No, but 60 days no matter what. Yeah, 60 days no matter what, you have the ability, we've had ULERPs that have come out at weird times. And we moved the committee around that to get in that 60-day window, so the board, we've done that.
But it's really only giving you one committee and one full board meeting to do it.
That's what it is today, ever. And it's been since ULERP was, that's what it is since ULERP was instituted in the
Alright.
70s.
I will also add that we do not have to take a position. We can simply memorialize the concerns and perhaps both concerns and reasons we might want to support something. So all of this discussion is helpful.
I think actually this is not a horrible idea, through the borough president and the board, we make a recommendation that there must be a requirement for the borough president to meet with the board during that period. How about that?
Is that realistic for you?
Yes, they have a
You
land
can
use staff.
put it in the charter. That the borough president must meet with the effective
Or
community board.
his or her staff.
Oh, no, it's not the borough, when you say the borough president.
Right.
It's
The office of the borough.
right.
I mean, the borough president's office
Yeah, well,
has become impotent in this century. And there's only 2 things that they are acting doing, which is part of the land use process and community boards. That's it. So if you still have them involved with land use and you tighten it further towards its
helps the process,
connection
right?
with the community boards, they still have the same single power.
I would follow up on Katie's one from Travis's, if there's something put in there where consideration is given to the constraints of the community board. We are constrained to be there at a certain time, to vote at a certain time.
No, actually, no, all community boards are different, JD.
That's right.
Our lens is our lens. All boards during the 60-day period have a mini meeting and a full board meeting.
That's right.
They all do.
So, but that 30-day period,
No, it's not 30.
we want to make it 60 days.
No, it's
It's always been.
It's
so
always
it's
60
instead
plus.
of- Instead of the borough president getting 30 days after us,
Right.
they get the 60 days alongside of us.
Concurrently.
They'll probably roughly.
Right.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
No, it does
The
not.
exact same amount of time.
Right, got
Right.
Mm.
The next thing is, should the city council be required to act in a limited time frame to improve projects on land control by health and hospitals? I find this to be an odd thing. They're a public agency, they may decide to do something crazy. And why should the city council lose its normal process?
Right.
I mean, that's,
It makes no sense.
I mean, this is, like, to me, this says someone has a
So
project. on-
to provide some context,
Oh, go ahead.
so the context here is that this relates, I think this was testimony received specifically about a project called Just Home which involved both housing and like supportive services on land owned by
Roberta.
health and hospitals. Apologies.
Yeah, Roberta, your connection is kind of funky.
Am
so
I
we're not-
breaking up?
Yeah, we're not
Is
getting all the
bad.
words.
Okay, I apologize.
So it's a
I
project. or something?
apologize.
We didn't get what this is about.
Health and hospitals had a project. There was a project that has been delayed indefinitely because council has refused to vote on the health and hospitals, the variance required that in order to move forward with this project, even though the zoning piece has already passed. So it's just being held indefinitely. And so that is, I think, the testimony that inspired this question, that there should be some sort of fixed time frame in which health and hospitals issues need to be voted on, either up or down.
This sounds so like there's something very specific that somebody wants to get around, and that's not for us. I would say we should apply no, because this is like a retail piece of charter.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's,
they need to they need to work it out.
They're playing politics and.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't use it. I also just.
there's a charter revision process for this.
I just wanted to add earlier in context, just to note, the city charter has, well, it was so we had the 2024 revision.
Yes.
Right.
Prior to that was 2020, but prior to that, it wasn't from 1975.
Yes.
1963, 1938, 1901, so these were.
The
Don't
charter
have
is not a way to get around political
And now
problems.
all of a sudden, these commissions seem to be used as a way to change things, and that could have really serious repercussions. And if we don't define specifically what small scale means, and they say, oh, small scale only means 6 to 8 units, but they don't define that in the charter, they can reinterpret that however they want in the future. And that's where things get really dangerous.
And this.
'Cause this is what governs the city.
Yes. This is our base governing document.
I think this one also says land controlled by.
Yes.
That's kind of,
It's very specific.
so it's not just for hospitals and.
Like, why,
No, it's for Health Hospitals Corporation.
but why should land that they're in control of be any different
We
than
don't
land
need to
that?
talk about this further, I think you got a
Yeah.
sense. You don't solve your political problems, then you get charter revision.
Yeah.
Right, let's go to the next one. Should the charter be amended in order to make it more challenging for places that have typically blocked new housing, particularly affordable housing, to veto a land use action of citywide importance?
No.
I don't even know what that means.
I know what that means. It's giving veto power over a ULURP process.
And saying, we don't agree with what the community decided, we're gonna overrule you.
Or we don't agree with what the council says and we're gonna.
Oh, this is the council member.
Deference.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Okay, so here's the thing. There's 51 council members, all different parts of the city. Parts of Queens, Southeast Queens look more like Nassau County than like our city, right? Than the town now. We have a diverse nature of our city. I don't think any one of us gets to say that council member doesn't know better for his or her district. Why would we elect a council member to represent the local interest, not the citywide interest? So if this means that, in fact, there should be no member deference, my answer is no, because I don't know what works in Bay Ridge or what works in, Tottenville and Staten Island.
If this sort of thing, why they're both for city council?
Yeah, why should Rachel, you have a funny face on, so talk about it.
And Liam has some.
Only-
I'm trying to understand.
More challenging,
Yeah.
is a euphemism for. Not allowed. It's like, oh, this is a challenging part. Well, it's a euphemism.
So I think we need to just talk about what council member deference is, and it's not. It's something that they've invented. Like, so the council member does not in the city charter have that final say, the city council does.
Yes,
And as a political means, in order to, make the speakers and the land use chairs happy, whatever, they have given them this individual authority that they did not. That
For any
actually statutorily have. And so. This is a means of kind of circumventing that
circumventing that.
political situation, which was not the original intent of the city council being able to approve land use projects. or veto them.
No,
And kind of make it more homeless.
They should be amended, they don't specify how they're amending it, they're amending it by taking a local council's veto away. That's what they do. But they.
Right, and by the way, this annoys me for one simple
Let me
reason.
ask you a question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a horrible euphemism for saying what it is, and you explained clearly.
There's a couple of bullet points down.
I know.
On the next page, should the precedent of councilmember deference on land use projects be able to be appealed or reviewed subsequently by another actor such as a borough president or panel of citywide and borough-wide elected officials? In other words, council says this.
Yeah, they wanna have a second guess going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating to see that. This is about centralizing and taking away local control on multiple levels, right? And I don't believe, that, by the way, there are always gonna be some council members who act irrationally. That is the nature of a diverse city, right? I sat in a meeting once with some new council members who've been there a while now, the land use meeting, and there's two questions that knocked me out of my seat. One of the, she was on the land use committee, this council member said, can you say what that ULERT means again? What does that stand for? I swear by God, and she was in office for like 2 years.
Have you seen congressional hearings?
Right, but then the other one, she said, and I watched the land use staff and council stop her. I just wanna know, how much can we get for this? She's like, we wanna get a fund, like, it's like, whoa, you know, like, so. I wanna say that our council comes from diverse backgrounds, levels of competency, whatever. But they're the ones who have been voted in by the people in that district. How do we as a city say you don't know better for your district? Even if it's crazy ass.
Well,
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just saying what's going on in our own district right now.
Yeah.
Right,
I will say, I do see some benefit of a borough-based possible review. Just because each borough is a little bit more similar, like you can't say that Manhattan and Queens have all the same housing stuff, but most of Manhattan is relatively the same.
no,
Been to Inwood?
man, what do you think? Then it's fighting Dival?
Been to Portland?
Really?
I have.
Oh, so it's wrong, sorry, I mean,
How,
haven't done it.
but how, I mean, so yeah, Midtown is super, super dense, but like you don't have like the same quantity of single family homes that you would have, say, in like Queens or Brooklyn or Staten Island.
Not the same style, you brownstone.
You have brownstones up in Washington Heights and block after block after block. Harlem has tons, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to figure out and trying to tease out, Roberta maybe can add, or maybe if you seem informed about this to help us, right? It's like, who are we to say we know better than someone who actually got the plurality of votes in the district, right? Like, who
I
the
think
hell
it's
are
a
we?
great, I think it's a really great point that we need to add to the letter. What I will say and what I'd like to focus on is there is one question about the city council's fair housing framework. So the city council is the opportunity to say, you know, and this is something that I think the board has touched on. So I think it is important to bring up here that, you know, every community district should be doing some degree of their fair share. We're not
Right.
saying how they need to do it, but they need to be doing something. This board goes above and beyond in this regard and is one of the top districts in the city. But that the same cannot be said about, you know, other places. And so there is a question, you know, should there be a penalty or teeth to a fair housing framework? And the way that this has worked in other places that have had this is, you know, there is the ability to, for example, in a place that has fallen far below the threshold, a builder could bring a certain type of project as of right if the you know, the district, you know, the community district has not permitted a certain level of housing units based on the fair share framework in the past. It could be, you know, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And so sometimes those builders remedy projects, you would call them, I think in Massachusetts, they have to be 100% affordable. And so that's one of the ways they help get the suburbs to contribute their fair share to building. And this has the potential to be a similar concept. And one place that I do think the community may have some interest in, you know, this, we do wind up building a great deal of multifamily, particularly affordable housing and there are community districts in the city that refuse to build really anything, and that only compounds the affordability problem here. I do understand that we don't want to be telling other electeds or other people what they should be doing, but if you were looking to, weigh the pros and the cons, I think that that's sort of the pro and the con here for a board like.
So what's really interesting is that this is similar to what happened by law and by the judicial decision in New Jersey, the Mount Laurel decision, where certain communities excluded, and then there was a decision making, everyone must have a fair share. I think that that has some sort of framework or measurable outcomes or something, right? We've talked about this among ourselves. If every community board had housing targets, then, and it's all relative to the board and this housing stock or whatever, then there's an actual measurement for that. I think that's something that we can support and should support.
Yeah, but that's not the way this is written. And Roberta, I guess that was my question to you. I'm a little confused by what you said.
Next page.
I understand. By what you said versus what is written, because what is written, at least in the first bullet point on the second page, is should there be a streamlined public review process for community districts that fail to permit housing? That is very different
So-
than saying that there should be a target percentage or whatever. So I just think we should be super clear on what we're discussing.
I should clarify and just see if I can close that loop, but basically the streamlined process would only kick into effect if you failed to meet that target. And I think the way people usually think about this, it's not for all projects. It's usually the process is only for certain types of projects. So it might be 100% affordable, or it might be mixed income. It might be, supportive. It might be government assisted, however you decide to define it. I'm not saying we should, but that's typically how it works.
But it doesn't quite say how the measurement works. So I think that's our question, that in concept, an idea like this, we didn't understand how that measurement works. Is that right, Katie?
Yeah, because sure, I don't know, you can set it up in a zillion different ways, but if you say, if a community district doesn't permit housing, X% of housing in line with our fair housing.
Annual
framework
production, whatever, right?
over X amount of time, then there's gonna be an expedited public review, which basically means it'll be like 3 days and nobody gets to have an opinion.
Or as of right.
Or as of right, as you said. But but where's the framework for that? Is it as of right to, so that there's 6% new housing every year or whatever the number is? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
So here's a real possible example from a news article this morning.
Okay.
A statistical analysis by an urban planning expert indicates that community district so-and-so that encompasses an area in Manhattan ranks dead last in the number of affordable housing units created in the last decade since 2014. I'm jumping ahead.
What is so-and-so?
He's not saying,
He's not saying it.
he's making them anonymous in the news article.
You can find them in the article if you want to look it up. 299 units, which that rounds down, comes to 0.4% of affordable houses in the borough, which rounds down to 0%. The title of the article is Affordable Housing Created 0%.
So, hold on,
So
first of all, we don't know the source of who writes this, et cetera. I think that this is a public meeting, so I'd like to just note that this is some article you found online. And I don't know that should be something that
I'm not saying it's fact, I'm
without
saying-
vetting,
yeah,
without vetting.
I'm just reading from I'm not saying it's fact,
Right.
but in answer to the question, if this is a number, if you don't hit 5%, then this district would be overridden.
We are going, this is very slippery
It's
slope.
not even overridden, it's
No,
not about.
this is a very slippery slope. We could have all sorts of things that happen if we write this into the city charter. We could have another pandemic that disrupts things, et cetera. And then what happens when you have it written into the city charter that a certain community has to do
It
something?
doesn't say that, as Amy points out, it just says a streamlined review. That means, what does that mean? What?
Again, it's not
That
defined,
doesn't
but I'm saying
guarantee,
it's,
that doesn't guarantee that they're going to put the housing in there, that just streamlines the process.
Or gets rid of the public.
Your concern is that if we're mandating that districts have to do something, that that we set a bad standard. or
No,
something?
not that we set a bad standard, we lock in a specificity that does not take into account all sorts of things which may naturally hold up some type of project, or it may naturally, what we're trying to do is to say, there are communities that want to maintain their community character. And we're saying, you no longer can keep your community character because you now have to get to a certain number of units.
But the issue,
And if you don't, then there's some sort of
but
penalty,
the issue is
because it's gonna happen anyway.
that conflicts with our statements before about fair share and
Right.
about not setting a standard for
I-
housing.
I agree, it does
And-
reflect.
And I will also offer, to your point about like, the things that hold up or pandemic and so forth. I think a good faith effort to meet the benchmark will probably suffice folks suffice for us in this room, because we're saying that you should be putting forward efforts to develop affordable housing in your district like we have.
You hit on exactly what I'm getting at. These should not be written into a city charter mandated where it locks it in. This should be where city planning, that's their job, is to
That's
plan for neighborhood, provides context to communities to say, this is what could happen, just like our affordable housing plan, which is the next thing on our agenda, which I hope we get to soon, is being able to give an outline of what's possible and working with communities to get there. But when you lock it into a city charter, now you have created a process which needs to be followed because it's law.
So I think there's a medium,
I'm gonna say there's a medium right there.
yeah, I
Take it away,
I
take it
feel
away.
like there is.
Yeah, there is a medium.
And I guess I would say like, if you say in the city charter and make it law, like. Everybody's supposed to be doing their fair share, if the community doesn't regularly, then there's gonna be this expedited process. And they should, projects trying to achieve whatever, make up the number, 5% of the citywide affordable housing for that year. Do you know what I mean? So if there's a pandemic, then nobody's going in. And so they're not gonna be
What a
going,
qualification is so no one gets forced for external acts of God.
right, but I mean,
That
there's
legal
a way that.
There could be many reasons why someone may not hit the mark,
Right, but
right?
I guess, I think there are ways of sort of saying like, it's, if you're saying it's a percentage of overall. And you even make it a small percentage, like say 3%, I mean, if the data is correct that Kevin read earlier, like. There are some places that haven't done any in a decade or whatever, so.
Right.
You do have to find some way of saying, all right, everybody, like, keep it.
Like an example is a low density homeowner neighborhood in Southeast Queens, right? Can refuse even a 4-unit condo, right? I think we need to deal with, and that's what happened, that's in New Jersey, that's how Mount Laurel was decided. That people would say, we will not have any multiple family housing here, even if it's a 4-unit condo, because that will change the character of our neighborhood, and that's not accurate, right? So I'm gonna say that maybe we can work upon this a little bit. Katie, can I ask you to throw some stuff in? Dolores, throw some stuff in, and Roberta, because I would like to say, there's some version of this that is protective, but yet says, if you are totally scofflaw, not caring, then you should have something you post upon it, because everyone's got to contribute, even if it's small. Does that make sense, Roberta?
Yes, and I think that we can say, we are interested in this fair housing framework and it being actionable, but we have these concerns, about either acts of God or it being written into the charter and it not being sufficiently flexible. I think that's a good way to balance it.
So Roberta, I'm sorry, that was a question, Roberta, how does it streamline the public process?
It means that
Don't ask me the word, how does that change? How does that get developed by streamlining the process?
So it depends. So streamlining the process could mean that the process is reviewed by a board of standards and appeals or a building department as opposed to going through a regular land use review process. It could mean maybe there's one, public hearing and then it goes to that board of or standards. It just wouldn't go through the entire full ULERT process. It could be any variation on that. And if we have concerns about what that is, we can articulate.
So we want to define what that streamlined process is, because we bluntly don't want, there should be to remove the public review entirely.
That's
Right. Okay, now the next two bullets, I think, will have very little controversy, because we say them over and over, no, we say them over and over. Should there be capital planning for community investments in infrastructure and concept of new housing? That's in every one of our letters that we've ever written. And should there be comprehensive planning framework that says not just housing, but everything else? And we said this over and over and over. I think this is a go, yes, enshrine our desires for the past 15 years. Okay, so let's move on. Council member, should the precedent of council member deference be appealed or reviewed? I think we talked about this already. This is about an end run about the local elected official, and I think our answer is no. Now, leveraging public land. Now we're talking about city-owned property or property controlled by an agency or Empire State Development, somebody, public, they say public land, right? That if it's got certain affordability requirements, it's streamlined. Let's take the word streamlined here and say what it really means is remove some level of public review. And my answer is, really, guys? Why is the public agency not held to the same standard as the private development community? They come up with bad things. We have a project in our district that might qualify for this. Could that be in Chelsea and could it be on Nigel? Like, honestly, I would say that public authority should be subject to ULERT, no matter what they're doing, because they're guardians of public land. Public land really should be subject to public review. The opposite, sorry, Kate.
I was just gonna ask, Roberta, could you give us a little, I don't know, background or history on this bullet?
So I looked away for a moment. This is relating to the land disposition process, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. So one of the things that the report mentioned was that because there is often an instance in which there's both a zoning change, so is a ULERT for that zoning change, and there is a land disposition process that kind of goes alongside that there are basically two ULERTs that are being conducted separately. And some part of that process, they're asking, can those go together? Can they be filed together? Can they be packaged together? Can their timeline go together? That is the question. Does it make sense to make them go through these two separate processes as is legally charter mandated? Or if there is a zoning change, could those two things either travel together on two concurrent applications or maybe even on the same application is the question that I think that the report was.
I think that's not quite accurate because I have done these and they only go concurrently. They never go separately. So I have acquired public property that required a zoning change, and there are just two ULERT actions, but it's the same group of applications, and it does not cost more to do this. They cannot travel separately ever, because you can't get to your end, meaning a closing, if you don't have both disposition and the zoning change in place at the same time. It just says if there's certain affordability requirements, I think that's the qualification, Roberta, saying that if it's affordable, a certain degree of affordable housing, we will streamline again. So Katie, take it from there.
I was just gonna say, Roberta, if you could just say that our comment is that it's very important to us that all public land projects go through ULERT. And that if there is a question, because we don't know the definition of streamline or anything, if there is simply the question, like you said, maybe even though we have them go through together here, maybe somewhere else they go.
That's the Park City Planning works.
Yeah.
I can testify to that. I've been in multiple times.
But I do think you should say that, the most important thing to us is that all public land processes shouldn't have to go through ULERT.
irrespective of affordability requirements, because the truth is, there could be an affordability requirement to say, this is an affordability requirement for a shelter. This is an affordability requirement for 90% market and 10% affordable, and that's the public discussion. Public land should be held in the public trust and treated the same. And I'm glad to say this all on the YouTube thing, we can write it down. I'm firm believer of this thing.
It only makes sense, I would.
Yeah. The next item is, should the city be able to streamline land acquisition process to HDFCs and other affordable housing companies? So, Roberta, here's a question for you on this. This is just great, except I know that the private sector frequently sets up HDFCs or other affordable housing companies in order to access the real estate tax exemption. And how do we know that there's a shell set up on purpose in order to get this exemption? So, and let me give you an example. I've been recently approached by a developer, a high-level major developer who wants to do a project in our district, and they're seeking to get an Article 11 tax exemption. Therefore, the project will be owned by it'll be partially owned by the HDFC, but it's not a not-for-profit. It's a company of that developer
But you know-
to access that exemption.
You know, a perfect example of this are the buildings on 49th Street. They
There you go.
created
Right.
an HDFC specifically to access
The
the
real estate.
Article 11.
Right.
That was never the purpose built, and they've clearly done it in a very poor way because we have all these problems.
So how do we fix that kind of loophole? Because maybe we have to note that it's gotta be not for profit, because what kind of not for profit? The other problem is I've seen developers set up purpose created not for profits just to get the HDFC exemption.
Joe,
Yeah.
my suggestion is because this is fraught with the potential for fraud, is not to
Yeah, it's not
support it
really,
at all.
yeah.
I
Roberta,
think
any
we could
thoughts
just
on this?
raise, you can raise these concerns. I mean, I think that all of these indicate that there's probably not board support for these items, but that we would want to register with the commission what our specific concerns are. You know, we have seen these HDFCs in our district, and we understand how this could potentially lead to fraud and or abuse. And so we can highlight that. We don't
And
have
maybe
to,
maybe
you
give
know,
some
say anything.
examples, maybe give some
Yeah.
examples where it could be an issue, right?
Sorry, that,
Yeah.
what is meant by, I just suppose, other affordable housing companies, HDFCs are so separate.
No, there's stuff, was Article 11, Article 2s, but
That's.
there's a whole,
what it means.
under the private housing finance law, section
Uh-huh.
5, all the 500 sections, all different, Mitchell Lamas,
Yeah.
that one.
Oh, it's Mitchell, I don't know.
yeah, I think we
So-
have 32 sections of the private housing finance law.
32
So
sections, there you go.
Wow.
All right, so then, should the city be able to streamline land position for the regular lots, not otherwise developable housing? That's it, so an irregular lot is something that is like 10 feet in the front and 15 feet of the back. Or that is some weird shape, or it's an interior lot, right? I think this is the kind of thing that actually is a useful thing. Roberta, can you speak to this?
So I believe the report specifically indicated that there were instances, you know, where you have one of these irregular lots, maybe, you know, someone is trying to develop, let's say, the Western Rail Yards, and there is a tiny irregular lot that is, you know, on the side, and it would be helpful to add to a public park or plaza. At present, you would have to go through the ULURP process in order to dispose of that very small piece of land and add it to the project. Whereas, you know, this asks, you know, should there be a streamlined process for that for certain uses? And so it could be affordable or supported housing, or it could be, you know, these accessory items that sort of help housing, like parks, schools,
But the point is,
easements in order to access the properties.
these are very unique circumstances. And again, if we get a definition of what irregular means, maybe that helps us to say this is a good idea, but define it. Now, streamline throughout just means full way public review. That's bullshit. So that's fair what it is. By the way, that's a technical term for streamline bullshit. So then the last one is, should the city have a streamlined process for acquisition? Again, who writes this stuff? For modest amounts of land, for affordable housing and supportive uses such as parks, schools, and access easements. I don't know what a definition of modest is. And that's like saying, I'm gonna make good faith efforts to give you everything you want.
Yeah, so again, Roberta, can you tell us
So I think that we would have to just, I don't think they defined modest specifically. But much like with the disposition process, there is also a land use review process when the city wants to acquire land. So the question is, you know, in certain instances, should the acquisition of land be required to, you know, go through a public review process? And there may be instances in which, you know, there may be an interest in not doing so. Here's one example I could think of. There's been a lot of discussion about the Elizabeth Street garden and potentially swapping an alternative private site for development to preserve that garden. And in order to, if the city wanted to acquire a new site to, you know, build the housing and, you know, preserve the site as it presently is, it would need to go through a other process in order to acquire that. In certain instances, would it be appropriate to streamline that process when there is a, you know, a compelling public interest because you're trying to build, you know, something up on that new site and you're trying to preserve something about some other piece of city owned land? Maybe it's something, it's a 1-for-1 swap there. That is one example. There are many ways in which you could see this might be useful, but understand that it, by and large, you know, if the city's acquiring land, public.
So can I say for the attorneys in the room, that's Katie and Rachel and the Nana and Travis, hold it, and then, and Kevin, and then the non-attorney who's done like, we've done like 200 deals. This is a way not to write something.
Right.
Okay? I mean, like, if anyone says to me, by the way, I'd like you to sign this document for modest amounts, you know, I just think we need to say that, no, unless there's definition and quantification. Because this is, again, like.
The governing document.
To drive, yes, this is, you could drive a truck through this one, right? So let's note our serious concerns and say without definition, this means you're just taking away public review of acquisition of land for public uses. And again, no, Mr. Mayor, you don't get to do that. That's why there's a city council and a city planning commission, and you're saying streamline, so it says, I, the mayor, control the city planning commission, and therefore I get not to have real public review, and I'm gonna acquire 4 lots of 300 feet wide frontage and do something there, because I like it, and you, the council member of the council, will not have input into this.
Honestly, John, also, the criticism of this is correct, 1 and 2. That revision of that statement also saves the city money because then it is spending years of litigation trying to define the modest means.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there'd be all kinds of crazy, and I know, Roberta, this is like written in a way. So Roberta,
Basically, no, I was like.
I was pointing to the screen, so, no, all right, anyway, so I think that's kind of where we fall on that, right? Now, the next one that we have in this committee is not, we don't do elections, that'll be somebody else, not for profits. Can I speak to this one? Yes, the city of New York should not only do advances, but if they don't pay, they should give you interest on that. I find it, I will tell you honestly, Fulton Housing has certain contracts, we get paid in full 6 months after they're over. Or 7 months after they're.
Try a year or 2.
Okay, a year, we actually, no, we recently got paid for some community consultant contract, it was 1 year and 18 months after completed. That's pretty crazy, I mean. So I think this is the kind of thing that says, it's all about making the procurement policy, like doing things in a more efficient way and saying that city employees must produce this stuff, otherwise there's a penalty. Does anyone from this committee feel not about that? I don't feel confident about that, I just feel like it's a fact.
Yeah, personal experience of that.
I mean, in principle, I think yes, but knowing how the city operates, you're putting in a charter something where the infrastructure has not
No,
changed.
it requires them to change the infrastructure. That's part of it.
But could the addition of the mayor's office of contract services be kind of a pretext for maybe inserting more mayoral control?
No, they control it, mayor controls the portion.
Right, so
They-
is
they-
this
Already
already?
controls it, so even the charter doesn't change, who controls it.
The council
So
doesn't
aren't
control this
they-
at all. because there's a huge pushback in the issue that, like standardized invoice and payment process. Every agency has a different payment process.
Oh.
Well, every agency has a different invoicing process.
My
Weird.
pushback is not that it is not a great idea. We do need to do this, and our nonprofits suffer greatly as they have to put up money or try to raise money in order to deliver on their.
Or borrow
programs.
money against the contracts.
However, yes, you're mandating that they streamline it, but we don't have a budget process in place. I just am concerned about enshrining these things in the city charter. If we challenge.
With proper funding and resources, something like that, the point of it is, you're right. You can standardize it, but if you don't fund it, it's not gonna happen.
And
Does that make sense?
but you put it in law, you create that opening for lawsuits, they haven't done it, there may not be a budget for
That's
it.
what I'm saying,
But you know,
with the proper,
that's why I'm pushing that.
yes.
My
I don't know
question,
if I'll solve that.
one second. My question on this is, again, vendors in good standing. What is that?
Oh, no,
That's well
that's a
defined.
legal term, well defined,
Okay.
well defined. In other words, like,
I don't
if you're
know,
not.
locals following your line,
My concern is that we're enshrining this as law, that have to have it done,
right?
but we have not figured out how we pay for it.
Okay.
How do we pay for
Well,
that?
no, if you put in the charter, that it's gotta be funded in order to do this processing.
But we also don't have the funding defined, we don't, there's like.
They define it. I'm just trying to get the guts of it, because you're correct to make these remarks. Travis, had more comment? Kevin?
John, I'm sorry, I respect your opinion, but I think we should go back to the elections. You jumped over it.
But it's not our committee. That's the reason.
Throughout this whole meeting and other meetings, we refer to elected officials this, elected officials that, elected officials not being responsive. Respectfully, in 2021, 23% of the electorate turned out. But in the even year election, 53% of people voted. So, and then IDO gave testimony that it would save millions of dollars. Now, I realize that even this has to be done by on the state level, because to have local elections,
I didn't vote this, I just, I didn't think it was our committee's responsibility, that's it.
which committee oversees
Basis, no,
arts, community and entertainment,
education.
education?
Yeah, actually, they're not meeting in June.
Oh,
I
so
will
there's-
also say if you have individual feedback,
Yeah.
feel free to send it over. I am happy to at least try and incorporate it and bring it to exec for some degree of, approval if it
So-
aligns
so-
with everything.
There are people who don't even know there's a primary election.
So then Kevin's note is that he would recommend we support the first bullet here as a way to get better turnout elections. How do people feel about that? Because no other committee may pick this up.
Oh, yeah,
Kevin, you
Yeah.
said this, you thought about that?
Yes, it has, yeah.
yeah,
These are the even numbers, have a higher turnout.
Correct.
like
Great,
more
okay.
than double.
And I'm sorry, I thought it was another
Because
committee. No,
most
let's take it
people
out.
only vote for president, they don't
Presidential,
vote on like.
National.
But the reasoning behind doing it at odd years is so that local electeds aren't dealing with national politics, but they do that anyway,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really matter.
I'm sorry.
Everybody's running on it.
I think we got a cent on the first bullet. You dropped on the first bullet. How about the second one? Should New York City voters be who are not registered? The political party vote, not party's primary.
I would
election?
just get rid of the primary and make it open.
Well,
So I've looked at both types of situations.
that's your point of view, man.
I've looked at both types of situations.
Yeah.
And I think that it should be told to a particular party. Because I definitely love the Michigan. Dabble where the Republican lines, like sabotage their election.
Oh, yeah.
And so, if you can manipulate the situation, so that we could carry it up front,
Yeah.
definitely do it.
So where's that coming from, this suggestion? Roberta?
So these are coming from public testimony that was given before the commission. These are two relatively well-recognized strategies within the voting rights space to increase turnout. And these have been adopted by other municipalities around the country.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's great, and we're in New York, and we are very much allied to parties and ideas. And I think we should ask the Democratic voters to vote Democrat and Republican voters to vote Republican.
And if you're independent, then good for
You're
you.
independent, God bless. I just think that's the center on the table here, so I think that'll be our position. All right. Now, let me, then say, climate is being handled by WPE, there's no question on that. And the last one we would handle is city map. And this is very obscure, folks, right? But understand that when the charter was revised, back in 1990, right? The borough presidents retained the mapping function for the boroughs, right? This is yet another take something from the borough presidents. And what this means is the borough presidents get to say, the address is X of this location. Or we will change the street name to Y, kind of thing. And how things get looked at, like if you have a large lot, you use the avenue address for the, and it's very much a local kind of thing. And this says, it just goes to city planning. So the mayor appoints city planning and that's it. I just feel like it's another moment of.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's administrative, but you know something, we do have a history. Not that have history, but the borough presidents control the maps. And why do they control the maps? Because they were separate cities. The city of Brooklyn had its own map, like, you know? So,
Yeah, I think the borough president should continue to do it.
yeah.
I would say with climate, there's a lot of different view of.
But it's gonna go to WPE.
Yeah,
I
WPE.
understand that, but it also affects you, and I hope.
So that's the with the borough president?
Yes, but I'm gonna say all of the climate stuff, we should definitely have. We can weigh in. Roberta, thank you for being a serious, like, foil and guide to this, because this is a little bit difficult. So,
I appreciate everyone for taking this up. It wasn't necessarily something the community board had to do, and everyone's really stepped up on it. So thanks all.
So on the agenda, it says discussion and vote.
yes, so on all of the items that we talked about tonight. And the notes that we made and the YouTube video that will record a lot of these things we said, is there a motion to approve these recommendations? Because we have to have something in place in order to adopt them at the exec committee in the end of June to bring this testimony to that July 7th, public hearing.
I would second that, or vote. I will make a motion that we adopt it, because the second.
Is there a second? Second by Katie, all those in favor?
The discussion, hold on.
Oh.
Discussion.
I'm sorry, Greg.
Allison's point. This is all coming from comments made.
No, this is commission. There was a full commission that put a report together and.
Based on the comments from the public hearings.
And not just the comments, these are people who are professionals, we know who the commission is, trust me.
Right.
Carl Weisbrod, former chair of the city planning commission.
As Travis pointed out, I don't know what the evidence is for all of this. This comes from comments.
It's not, again, I'm gonna say it's
And
not,
experts.
it's experts, it's organizations, it's a broad range of people. I think there are some that are truly fact-based, some that are political-based, some that are trying to get things done based, and some that are helping the mayor base. So given all that, right?
That's 4 pieces.
Huh?
And JD, the testimonies are available on the Charter Revision Commission's website. So if you would like to see who has opined on this and what they have to say, that is a matter of the public record. So if you can actually access that.
I mean, that's a consideration. A lot of developers get up there and make a comment, say we can't do this fast enough, and like Travis points out. Is that true?
No, they may not make a comment, they may get someone else to come and make a comment on their behalf. They don't wanna be shown they're making a comment.
Right, whatever, but again, streamlining, how does that mean it's gonna be cheap? Does it? Is that-
JD, we don't know. All we can do is the document that's in front of us, consider it carefully, have a response back to the,
We'll include asking for definitions if that's actually.
of course.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be, and thank God for our YouTube video, because it's gonna help flush this thing out. So given the fact
That's what-
we had a,
That's for-
oh, look at it, please, I'm sorry.
It's cookies.
It's good.
I gave them all cookies and I didn't.
So we're taking the position that we want to keep council for deference.
Yes, that's what we talked about, yes.
Okay.
You can vote against it.
I just want to understand, I guess, the argument a little bit better. Because this is something that's actually kind of specific, where they're saying. If you appeal by, borough president or handle citywide and borough-wide recommendation, they're giving us some specificity on who. If they overrule the council member, won't overrule the council.
Right, so I vote for a council member to represent me in council. And I vote for him to represent our narrow local interests. He or she, sorry, he or she represents, I didn't say it that way, our local interests. And no, I don't believe there should be, this will create more political jockeying, because the honest part here is that this is not the affordable housing project in Harlem that got knocked down because the council member said no. This will be developers paying various other council members or borough presidents or some other commission and influencing them, because that's how in the city of New York, the politics of development works.
I don't understand what thing though, the deference, it could be overruled, right?
The council can, yes.
Yeah.
The council shall.
That's a political, on paper, in reality,
On paper, they can,
in
they
reality.
No, you know what's really good? He said, as a political matter, they can, and that's important.
Yeah.
Because as a political matter, we get one vote for our council member, not for everybody else in the world.
But there's a tension here.
Yes.
We're thinking like everybody should do their fair share, and obviously.
Right.
Conversely, are we trying to say to the community, we think this is how you should?
Yes, we
But
are.
the community then elects somebody. By the way, it works both ways. We're thinking
That's
the
right.
negative aspect, where a council member says, don't do something. But recently, there was a council member in a different borough in Manhattan who changed their mind on a project and put it in there against community opposition, and they lost their reelection bid.
That's right.
So it works both ways.
Right, I'm saying that,
And that's the consequence.
I say honestly, the real issue we have here is, this is the political system. That you elect somebody, there's a push and a pull in every legislature, and there's both deference and there's committees and whatever, how they deal with it. And that push and pull is called democracy, and just because someone doesn't like what that council member acts, there's two remedies. The full council can say, we're not gonna do this, we're gonna vote on it, we're gonna prove it. Or the council member acts, supports something, and they can vote out the next one. I just think there's a beyond a slippery slope to say that a third body reviews, because we are in a housing crisis. This housing crisis stuff is not, this is charter. This is well beyond it. This could be locate a nuclear reactor on the west side. It's not about a housing crisis. We gotta get past that, because this is our governing document for the city of New York. And
Well, the way this is written, couldn't that body, let's say in this rule agrees with the council member.
Yeah.
But couldn't that body overrule? the council
Absolutely.
member And come up with a negative conclusion?
Yeah.
So it works both ways.
I would also argue that, like, I think an individual is far more susceptible to political jockeying than, you know, your hypothetical panel of 5 borough and citywide elected officials, all of whom are coming from different standpoints. And I am thinking a lot about that example you brought in Harlem with Crystal Richardson Jordan.
Yes.
Which is that it just using that as a frame of reference where
The
community is one place, the borough president is one place, everybody else is one place. And this person on a political kamikaze mission takes affordable housing for like 200 people.
So can I say to you, you're talking about 1990, right? Let me finish this, please. Let me finish. Councilmember Harlem tanked a major affordable housing deal because she didn't vote for it.
Now against it.
Like, no, like, Ken, oh my God. It's an affordable housing deal that she did not support, and for her own personal reasons, political reasons, she didn't support it. It's not that it's now a gas station, that's what it was to begin with, right? And it was a rezone. This is here, bringing us back to 1990. This was the Board of Estimate, and the city council replaced the Board of Estimate. And if you don't think that those 11 members of the Board of Estimate, which were the final say on all land use actions in the city of New York, were not subject to all kinds of influence. They were absolutely subject, and we suffered and dealt with it. There were 5 borough presidents, there was the controller, the mayor had appointees. And trust me, I watched it happen, and I dealt with it for decades. It's not a remedy, it's saying that some other body is gonna know better, they're gonna get the same lobbying, and it is, I mean this super respectfully, it is naive to believe that not everybody is going to be lobbied and start to be paid or start to do something to get what the outcome was. It's not all about affordable housing. This could be easily a, do not build a humongous waste treatment plant in a district, and everyone says, oh, okay, we're gonna overrule you. Would you wanna be in that district where your council member got overruled and you have a waste treatment plant next door? Probably would.
Philosophically, I see it as majority minority. We have a for a majority, but the minority is always protected. That's an important concept in our democracy. So in this case, the minority thinks I'm not something. The minority. The majority may overrule it, but we have to vote the rights of the minority, even though the majority wants something else. I don't know how else to do, except by providing that sort of flexibility. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, in that case you point out, yeah, that was maybe not the right thing. But then you don't want to lose that protection of the minority communities, I think.
More question?
Yeah, we do.
More question, we have a motion and a second, and we did not vote.
Correct, sorry, Katie, you have a comment?
Well, I was just gonna say, I see your point, Liam, but the problem is that like, maybe the council member is always gonna vote for whatever their community says, and maybe the community is always going to vote against the waste treatment facility, all the affordable housing plans and everything else, and so maybe there should be. I mean, we did talk about it earlier, like, if you always vote against all the bitter things, then there
That's
should
the
be a
key.
way of
That's
like
the key.
getting in and saying, oh, no, you know, but that way,
If you are exclusionary, there should be inclusion,
yeah.
and it's demonstrating its measures. But just because somebody says something that may not be a popular point of view to a broader majority, don't get to overrule the locality. And this is well beyond us, and I find this, I think the council will fight against this tooth and nail here. Because I don't know what's best for, far Rockaways, exactly, I was thinking of far Rockaways, I don't know what's best.
Okay, call question.
But boy, you're good to stand up to all of that.
I'm gonna make a motion that we do not take a position on Councilmember Deckers in this level.
Okay, so you have to do that,
It's a friendly amendment.
not from,
No,
as an amendment, okay? So Liam put on, so we set aside the main motion for a second, whether or not to amend, not support, our motion includes not supporting removing member deference. So,
Just in that piece.
just in that piece.
Yeah.
So,
Good motion.
on his amendment to remove our support no, do better, remove our support of member deference. All those in favor?
Well, I made a motion.
We have to have a second on that motion.
Sorry, second on the on his amendment. Okay,
So-
is there a second on?
I'll say.
Good, okay.
But that's, hold on, that's an amendment.
We're doing an amendment, no, we're
Yes.
doing an amendment first, JD, separate from the
So
main
if you
motion.
agree with Liam that we should not take that position.
I understand that.
Then there's a
So
vote.
I don't do it.
No, it's not
Vote.
you.
We're not taking anything.
It's not a friendly thing.
Yeah, then you don't vote against
I'm
this
not-
amendment.
I'm not saying that we're taking a position.
Take no position.
Just that we take.
Stay silent,
neutral-
stay silent.
You want.
Liam's amendment,
Quick thought.
Liam's amendment is to note that, is to propose that we take no position on eliminating member deference. We're voting on that separately from the main motion.
Right.
It's
Oh.
moved by Liam, second by Kevin.
Yep.
All those in favor of taking no position on member deference, please raise your hand.
And Roberta,
Back there at the
so we have.
Okay.
Hector,
All those in favor of
Taking the position.
taking position on member deference, please raise your hand. Okay? It counts, but I thank you for really hanging in there and doing this follow.
Now,
but
now
but
it
we,
refers to
but
the
we
first.
did not do this vote, right? Because we have to have a vote on.
I'm going there.
Good.
Now, the amendment having failed, let's go to the main motion as proposed by JD and seconded by Katie, right? All those in favor of the main motion, please raise your hand. This is like real fucking parliamentary procedure, great. And I mean, in democracy, by the way, in democracy, there's no member deference.
Roll call.
You can't tell if your hand is up or not, is it?
Hector,
No.
He's voting no.
Okay, got it.
you're voting no?
So those are the people who voted yes.
Wait, we didn't have a no vote yet.
Okay.
Now, voting now.
Who
No,
was voting against supporting the recommendation of charter revision?
so that's Hector.
Hector, you're voting no, right? No.
Okay,
Oh, okay, fascinating. So I guess, I wanna say here, democracy was in motion for a moment, because what happens is, someone brings something, it fails, and then you read the room and see what's happening, and then you say, well, you throw baby out with the bathwater or try to get something across. So I always caution the members here, when we get to that point, if you lost, but you don't do nothing, right? And that's the troubling way that we work sometimes. I think we got past that, I just said it, but it's totally right.
So this recommendation goes to the full board or?
It's gonna go exec.
go to exec. because it has to reconcile with waterfront parks.
Right. By the way, this was seriously freaking
And
great.
it's July 7th or something.
Yeah.
Before our
Yes,
next.
freaking great.
The last item.
On to the last item.
The
I
first
need
item,
a 2-minute break. Like, hold on.
Too much iced tea. Okay, so,
Code is 7531.
so I'll frame it so we can keep moving. So you all have in the Dropbox, the updates and the changes that we discussed at 2 subsequent meetings about the affordable housing plan. What Joe would like to go over this evening is some of the language, he did not, the language, that's, of the opening of the preamble of the body part that just has language, and I think that's what he wants to go ahead and highlight in this portion.
I want to go over the entire document.
161 pages. So Jenny, I think so, page 1.
What's that?
Okay, we'll put it to vote. Okay, so we'll let Joe talk about that. While he is in the restroom, I think just to keep the conversation moving, so we don't do JD's recommendation, which is to go page by page. Did everybody have a chance to look through it, and was there anything that they noted in terms of where things were placed
Well,
or
I'm
language?
confused, because wasn't there more stuff added
Dolores?
today?
Yeah.
Yes,
Just
yes.
that item.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm
that-
sorry.
He's gonna talk about that, but I'm talking about, yes, Nelly,
I need to step away also for 1 second.
go ahead, we're not doing anything, I'm just trying to keep things rolling. So Joe's gonna outline the things that have changed, but from what we saw in the Dropbox, obviously there was all of our input, just wondering if there's anything glaring that stuck out to anybody, so that we can at least just get that out of the way.
Yeah, all of those documents were just updated 3 hours ago.
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to review it.
There's, the main thing that he's gonna focus on is. All right.
But that was just for me, this, so the structure.
Okay, so Joe, what I outlined was that, we're gonna go over the changes that we made in the memo part and the brief
Yes.
part. I did ask the question for the body of what we received, which, of course, these are all the changes we talked about in 2 meetings. Did anybody have any concerns about what we had seen before
Yes.
the text changes?
Right. So, and then there's one more piece, and that is the major change, the recommendation from the land use committee on the very high density districts. We'll talk about that, right? So can I, Nellie, can you put up,
She was gonna step away.
She stepped away.
Oh,
She
yeah.
was a little closer.
okay, so.
I'm sorry, I'm back.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect time.
Nellie, can you put the housing plan up, but go, and just, and it's the slides, but go to the section that starts on page 123. This is a new section that
Okay.
came out of the work we did at the, land use committee. So this section, while it's coming up, is page 123. This is very high density zoning areas that came out of land use. At that committee meeting were JD, Rachel, myself, and Dolores.
I don't know if I was there, but.
No, okay,
Sure.
right, and Kevin is there too, right?
Next slide.
Yes, next slide, please. So the land use committee recommended these locations, these 6 locations, and I want to go through them clearly to understand why and what we talked about them. Next slide. So the first one you see before, that's the Javits Center marshalling yards, the block between 11 and 12, 3 to 3-4, right? This is, again, has been in our plan for many years, and we looked at this. This is actually coming to the community board. The Empire State Development Corporation is going to put out an RFP for this site, probably in the next 2 months. And this is a full block site, state-owned, controlled to the Javits Development Corporation. So we said, okay, this makes sense because this could be a larger FAR, right? We know that one FAR has to be kept. withheld for the Javits use. The marshalling yards, this is where the trucks pull in, deliver all the stuff for the various exhibits, and we have to have that as part of this site.
Do they still use that? I thought when the
They use
graphics was expanded, that they moved that internally.
They still use it.
Okay.
Even with the internal move, they still need it. So imagine these humongous trailer trucks coming with all these display exhibits.
Yeah, no, but I've seen them going in under the expanded building. I didn't know that they still.
Yeah, it's overflow.
But
Overflow.
just 1 acre or one.
One FAR. It may be less, but we know that we have to in our plan reserve something, because that makes that Javits Center functional, right? So here, we had originally said that this would be an FAR of 12, FAR 13 with one FAR for the Javits, so it would be 12. With the increase, we note that this is a larger, that we would recommend in R 12, which is 18 FAR, that's the densest district that exists. And that we list our affordability regime, and we do the rest of the plan, we don't know what's gonna be in the RFP. So this is a high dent, and in the and we note in our text that there be controls on height and bulk and the massing of it, so it's not this intense, 90-story towers. That's away from the river, and to push the bulk away from the river. So that came out of land use.
In the Highland.
Oh, and away from the High Line too.
Sorry, just, I have to look here to decide the details. So it looks like this is saying 877 affordable units, right? Oh, I see, sorry, now that I'm able to see the rest of it, and which I guess means, but that means it's 30%.
Correct.
Okay.
All of these are our same formula for the plan, 30% affordable. We may, as part of the RFP, be able to negotiate better, but we're trying to give some floor as to what should happen.
All right, wasn't there some discussion, but I may be confused between meetings, about changing the request from 30% to 35% when we.
Yes, this is part of in general, for a higher density, making it a higher number.
Yeah,
So
so is there a reason we're not asking for 35%?
this is part of our discussion tonight.
Okay.
We can say that for densities above 12 FAR, we want a higher percentage of affordability.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Okay,
The zoning committee didn't take it.
it didn't take a stand, but we can.
Okay.
All right, so that's gonna be something that's gonna say, put it out there to say 35%.
Yeah.
Also, we are adept at pushing the envelope on affordability.
You're not crazy?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good, that's good.
Yes. Okay, our next site. Our next site, this is one of the ones that already is at an 18 FAR today, right? This is
Wait, okay,
the,
so just so that I'm clear about this, so that what we're saying is we would change it in this document.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. This is a new site we found when we talked about this at our first review. That's the parole office at 314 West 40th Street. And uniquely, this is already zoned 18 FAR, but of course not for residential use. So here we would say, let the state do residential here up to 18 FAR. Now, the difference here is we must accommodate 2 FAR for the parole board. That's necessarily gonna go away, it needs to have a new home, right? And the Department of Corrections owns this space. We don't need this to be rezoned, because it already is subject to 18 FAR. It's merely, and it could be, if it's done by the state, this will be done with a general project plan, no rezoning needed. And so I guess we'll attach here though, Katie, we went to full affordability because the site is so small.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can't do the sugar cube math in my head, but if it's 18 FAR, shouldn't we be able to fit more than 257 apartments?
Not with this frontage.
But I got that.
It's like 100 by 100 or something, 125. So it's the other ones are huge, full blocks, it's a very thin block site.
And you're saying the first couple floors would be for the parole office, and then after this.
And that's why it reduces the number of units. The next one is the Quill Bus Depot. Again, it's been our plan for many years. But here, we say again, go to the 18 FAR, right? But in this case, retaining 3 FAR for the Quill Bus Terminal, for the Quill Bus Garage operations. All of these are industrial uses that we're grafting something onto.
Will we here also want to go up to 35%?
I think we should.
On Katie's suggestion?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, the next one is a very high density district. Next slide, yes. So this is the 11th Avenue corridor. We have been pushing for 10 years.
Last.
This has a limited, 10 years plus, has a limited residential FAR of 6, because that's how Hudson Yards zoning was done. We asked for it to go to 12, and that was the max. Here, we're saying, take the residential FAR up to an 18 FAR. And if you notice here, Katie, we caught the note, 35% affordability for the first time. Didn't, not in the others, right?
A question.
Yes.
What's on the screen is not the same document that is in the Dropbox. The order is the same.
This is the updated one? The
This
one
is
that came later?
affordable housing plan presentation, 6/5/25. That's what's in the Dropbox.
So, Katie, I'm looking on the Dropbox,
No.
it's matched so far, what are you?
Cause there were two that were sent, there was one original and there was.
There was the original and then
There's one at 4
revised.
o'clock this afternoon.
No, this is
But
early.
it supersedes. So there's the plan, the plan only has words. And
Correct.
then there's the plan presentation, which is the slides.
Yes.
And that was put in 3 hours ago.
No.
Or it was updated
It
for you?
was updated 3
Yeah,
hours
it was.
ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was
So-
done.
So that updated version is not lining up with what's on the screen.
All right, cause
She's looking at it right now.
yeah, what I'm looking at online in the Dropbox,
It's
has
matches
so
that.
far. So what is it that you're saying isn't lining up?
Does it match this map, Katie?
The pages.
The pages, so like you went from marshalling yards to parole office.
What is your
It went
picture?
marshalling yards to the Quill Depot in mine.
It's
So
not.
I went from Javits to parole office to the Quill Bus Depot.
Okay, it's on the screen now.
Okay, alright.
Sorry,
Trying
guys. All right.
Find it.
So this picks up the Quill on the south, the Marshall Yards on the north, Quill Bus Depot, the 11th Avenue corridor. Now, I want to make note of something very specific. And that is, let's go to the next slide for a second, because this is a really big one, folks. This next slide looks at a site that was not in our prior plan, which is part of the A2 sub-district, right? This is the densest site that is not built, that exists in our district. This is part of what are called the Four Corners. That's the blocks between 3-3 and 3-5 of 10th to 11th Avenues. They were upzoned for major commercial density. They're at the Tishman Spiral Building, 55 Hudson Yards and 50 Hudson Yards have been built out on these sites. The unbuilt site is owned by the exact same development team, comprised of Moynihan Enterprises and Boston Properties, that was awarded Site K. That's the site opposite Javits, between 3-5 and 3-6. And I described this in our land use committee meeting. The land use committee was being briefed by the Site K developers. JD, myself, Paul Devlin, Jesse. And these developers, out of the blue, said, we're telling you how many, because the Site K is a huge site, right?
I'm sorry, are you saying, so I'm confused, Site K is just a block north, is that it?
But
So
it's the,
just,
right, but it's the exact same ownership,
okay, got it.
right?
Yeah,
But it's not as dense. Site K is not as dense, like 26 FA or not, like, but not 33 or
Okay.
21.6.
all right,
Those developers proposed, and we talked about this, we reported to the land use committee. They would like to consider not building residential, not building commercial on this site,
on Site K or this side?
on this site,
Okay,
which is a super commercial site, right?
okay,
6 FAR max residential. They proposed, would the board be interested in considering a residential building of 31 or 33 FAR at this location,
with how much affordable?
with 30% affordable.
35%.
Well, correct.
This is what they came back with.
We're talking, they were just talking, and we were shocked. And then we talked about it, and in that discussion, which was very informal, said, well, that's if and only if you have all these other public services need to be accommodated
Yeah,
in general. And this was brought into the land use committee, whether or not to include this site in our mapping for for very high density residential, right? And what really we've kind of landed on was, there's a whole corridor here. Go back one, please, Nelly. That this corridor could give us the ability to say that if you're gonna build this high density residential zone, especially this 34th Street corner, we want you to locate the public services that are not located yet in Hudson Yards. Space for police station, school, space for library, in other words, all the public services that have been ignored, going back to that charter revision thing, that public services don't get cited. And that we build into our ask, and that request lives in the text of the plan saying, this is, yes, we support these high density, very high density zones, if and only if you bring along all the needed public services must exist.
Okay, can I just ask some clarifying questions? Site K is just residential. Yeah,
Residential in a hotel,
residential,
but majority residential.
okay, majority residential, but that's like market rate, whatever.
No, affordable. They're 30% affordable.
Okay, good, all right. And then, so then we're saying that this is new, they've offered like, hey, you know, if you let us build a hut, then we'll allow you to build a hut.
What it really was a very informal discussion saying, would the board ever consider an even higher density
Yeah,
use for residential?
yeah.
And then the immediate response was, well, yeah, but we need all these services, otherwise we
And then
can.
my last question is, then are we suggesting that those services, the school, the library, the whatever, would they be in this,
In this, right,
in this space that is south of, Site K?
those, it would be on this, it would be required to be in this district,
Somewhere in there.
in there, because all of these together would produce, so let's keep turning the map.
Okay, actually, but just to be clear, so we're not saying. So we're saying it'd be 35% affordable housing in this big building, plus the school, the police station, right? We're not saying like,
I think what we said, what my concern was, this is adding 30,000 people to the district. There is nobody I know that's saying our sidewalks are not crowded enough, we need to bring in tens of thousands of people. So we emphasized at the language committee that this all has to go with services, parks, infrastructure, that's also part of this.
So
So you're right, it's the broader community, not just this site.
got it, okay.
Nelly, skip to page 130 for a second, is that of order? Page 130? Yeah, right here. So understand the scale of putting these high density districts together, right? This proposes with the sum of all these districts to produce 17,371 units, of which 7,000 would be affordable.
Oh,
So guys, we're talking about building another city in our district.
Small town.
Not a small town, that's a fairly large town.
17,000 and what, let's say 2.5 per household,
Mhm.
it's 42,000.
42,500 residents. I think we are well within our rights to say if we're bringing that degree of people and households in, we need services to service those people.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I will note that based upon the discussion of land use, Kevin added in, everybody added in, and in one of the pages, which I need you to look at separately from tonight, there is a whole section of text saying, what are the kinds of services we need? I would appreciate if we could look at that and beef up that.
But that was, Joe, that was regardless whether an individual triggered analysis or not, it was a cumulative analysis over a period of time.
It is saying for all these high density districts,
Right.
you developers have to bring these services with you, and we need to give you.
The problem we run into is, the single one by itself may not trigger it, but the cumulative.
It's not about even triggering.
Our
We're-
plan, we're suggesting
Yeah, we're past
that
triggering.
you are going to build,
Agree.
then you're gonna do it, right?
But I-
So trigger.
But I
That's
do,
what
right,
that's how you phrase
but I
it.
am recommending that you look on, it's on page 18 of the text, right? You need to look at this, beef it up. I think we should probably have a bulleted list, something that makes it so highlighted that when we do this, and then Dolores's number is great, the 2.5. We need this to be part and parcel, which ties back to the charter commission discussion, that you must have a plan for services, right? And if you have a building that's an FAR of 33, you can fit in a school. And if there's gonna be 42,000 people, there's gonna be somebody with kids in this thing.
Or they've had kids
Huh?
after they've been there.
Right, so I think
Because
this is,
one of the things that was, a statistic that somebody brought out at our ACES committee was that some government agency, maybe it's the DOE, I don't remember who it is projecting that by like 2030 or 2040, there's gonna be 25% fewer kids in the city overall.
Or,
And then in our district, they're saying it'll be a smaller percentage, it's like 12% loss or something, but they're basically saying. Despite every, these big buildings finding out, blah, 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 they're saying that because of the affordability issue, that families, with kids can't afford this.
Right.
So I think one thing that we just have to be alert to is that I think there's sort of this. Attitude by the city, yes. We don't have to worry so much about building schools because our projections are telling us that even if all these buildings go up, there aren't gonna be kids there. And I think we have to say, of course, you know what I mean?
That's a technical phrase. Right, and I wanna say here that we also wanna put in this whole discussion about very high density, we want a range of household sizes and we want some larger family apartments. Because that is a little people in the city, because they have a place to grow into. Yes.
So I know we have a percentage for 2-bedroom.
Mhm.
For very high density, should we add a percentage of 3-bedroom?
Why not?
That's a nice idea.
Why not?
Yeah.
Because one of the things here is that there's nothing saying in these huge humongous buildings that you're gonna have a spread of income bands, right? They don't need to be all 50% or 60% or below, because there's so many units, if a single building is producing 1,000 affordable units. That should be spread across income bands, obviously, and they're not gonna be tied just to. Like on a state site, they're not tied to the 45X, but the state's giving them a pilot, figure out how to do it. A lot of times the tax exemptions determine with the AMI that you're trying to. Question or thought? I see percolating.
I don't know if it's too prescriptive, I think it's an excellent goal with 3 bedrooms. With some developments. I think the bedrooms, couldn't take a field goal on them, should you say that the.
Don't we have something like that already too? Like it has to be of a certain.
Yeah, we
Size.
have
We do that.
we have methodology, and also there's requirements for any of these things being reviewed by various agencies.
So
Minimum
3
sizes.
bedrooms, 3 bedroom would be more or less than X, and each bedroom would be more or less than Y.
That's all, those are all regulations at the state or city that actually prescribe minimum bedroom sizes.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So what, yes, I just wanna say, what do people think about go back to the map for a second, Nelly? Go back to the map, go back to page,
28.
128, yeah. 128. I mean, I wanna say here that for those of us who are advocates of the, build. We're giving in this section, and this district alone, a lot of build. And we include the CBS site to the north, talked about before, we included the Wicklow North items, but 17,000 units proposed by a community board is not something to sneeze at.
But can I ask a question about that? And I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't paid enough attention to the city of Vesta to know the answer to that. So if we approve this, and it's all like great, and we, suggested 17,000, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Can the answer still be, well, zippy for you, but city of Yonge requires that you still add X and all these other places too here.
City of ES produces 1,000 units in our district.
I know, but I guess what I mean is this helping us with city of Yonge or no?
Who knows?
Yeah.
So.
I don't think it's really worth
You're
worrying about.
putting it in a different way, there's a mechanism now in City of that's in place for people to go ahead and propose that they can make a change to a building so if they add affordability. And that doesn't change because we've said that we're producing all this affordable housing. Which was the argument of we're voting no, was to say, we have mechanisms
Yeah,
already in
Right,
place.
okay.
And everyone wants to build here anyway,
Yeah.
and we can achieve above
Yeah.
and beyond
yeah.
what City of does.
So we're gonna
without-
achieve above and beyond anyway, and then both like that. Okay, got it.
So I want to bring your attention to one other small section. I think we can end here, except I ask everybody to read the text portion and make comments on the text. Not tonight.
But then we can't vote,
This weekend. Certainly we can.
okay,
Yeah, because I mean,
so we review.
yeah, I mean, there's the text came out of comments that this committee made. Or the land use committee made. It's not like we pulled it out, nowhere. Yeah. No, Mike.
What?
And Mike, of course, committee.
Yeah, of course I would.
All right, can you please go to page 92, and then we'll go ahead on this one. Yes, I'm sorry, go to page 98. No, that's not gonna help you. All right, I'm sorry, I apologize. One thing I wanted, it's not included here, and I apologize for it. We have now quantified the number of units preserved in each of our special zoning districts, that's from demolition.
Say that again?
Yeah,
And we're gonna add a slide that's going to,
they're ready there, but the numbers aren't dropped in for some reason,
oh, okay.
all right? So I know that in Hudson Yards, it was like, 2,000 units to be preserved. We knew how many were in West Chelsea in the Garment Center. Can I ask quickly, lightning round around the table, how many units do you think are protected from demolition and buildings in the special zoning district? Huh?
We have.
Okay, we have never, this committee, this plan. Has never quantified how many units receive protection from demolition and therefore preserving units, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding how we preserve units in Hudson Yards. but-
No. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we moved to the whole district now.
No, okay, there are 4 special zoning districts in which there are demolition protections. Fulton Special District, Hudson Yards in the Hell's Kitchen Sub-District, Hudson Yards, along 9th Avenue and West, Garment Center in the mid-blocks, and West Chelsea, the whole district.
And that means that when, like, nobody can ever apply to demolish.
Right, and these are a combination of rent stabilized, market rate, co-ops, whatever, they can't be demolished, they're preserved, right?
Okay.
So the metric that was missing in our whole discussion in City of Yes was that, no, we should do this, we're gonna get 1,000 units in our whole district, 1,000 units, right? We knew we preserved, like, 400 here or 2,000 here. We have finally done almost completely the quantification for Fulton Special, so I wanna do a quick sense of how many units we have preserved. What is your thoughts, Katie, how many units?
I think I found the slides.
You can't find the slides, not there.
It's not the
So
anti-demolition.
considering it's,
No, it's not.
considering it's 901, I love the spirit of
I love the
having us
spirit.
guess, can we just get the answer?
No, I wanna get a sense of people. No,
I follow a friend and you're the friend.
no, go ahead.
No, it's a game show, it's a game show, okay,
Who
so
wants to
give
be
me
a
the answer.
millionaire? I phone you and the answer is.
It's 18,000 apartments.
Wow.
Out of every,
It's 18,000 apartments in Flint Special alone. Every,
they're all.
Everything in preservation.
That's all I'm buying.
Wait, so that's not this page, Joe?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's excluding malls.
But it is 18,000. Very impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost passed. Oh, I'm sorry, never mind. Go to page 99, never mind.
Or no, 98.
98.
98, we have a total,
So the number of units preserved is the 19,880, just in Clinton.
Yeah, so we're talking our extensions to Hudson Yards, Garment Center, and Special West Chelsea, 27 buildings. We have preserved 1,100 buildings with 21,479 units. I would say that anybody that says that preservation regulations have no meaning are wrong here. And the only thing that's left on Clinton is to look at 50 more buildings. We're not quite, we're looking at DOB, HPD, trying to, but out of 951, only having 50 left to look at is a pretty good indication.
And are we keeping track of like how many of them are market rate and how many of them are?
We don't have that information.
So it's city of preserved.
Huh?
It's city of preserved.
City of Preserved, yeah. I just think, and we will put this on each map saying what it is. I think this is an important statistic. As we have folks constantly saying to us, either we're not building enough or affordability. The combination of new development and preservation is remarkable in Community District 4. And I would ask that the city of New York, the people who do this YouTube video, take that and smoke it in their pipe. Because these two together really make a difference. The fact that this community board can say that we're looking to create 17,000 new units on a bunch of high density sites we should get some additional merits and points for also having reserved 21,000.
Right.
And what is the complaint though? Like, is the complaint, well.
The complaint is that these are preserved, you can't do any development.
Right, I was gonna say, so is the argument like, sure, you've preserved 21,000, but if you allowed them to be expanded or, you know, increased, then you could have more for the, is that the argument?
Yeah.
You can have up to that calculated amount of 1,000 more units of the whole district.
Yeah,
And not revival as we have.
the city of yes, the yield based upon its DCP's own formula created 1,000 units, which required.
So,
Got it.
Joe, so was this the only
That was it.
change?
That's it.
Okay, and then we're gonna review text that we've already recorded at
Yes.
previous meetings and also that has been reported at the land use meeting to review as a committee.
So I asked that we seek a motion to adopt the amendments on the plan. As always, we'll have this whole list that you see here, all the changes page by page that get adopted. But please look at the text. And before our
Exactly.
exec meeting, please send in
comments.
any comments to that text. And it's all highlighted in yellow in the Word doc.
So moved.
Second.
I can do it.
I just moved. I said so
And I
moved.
second.
Second. All those in favor of adopting the amended plan. I also want to do something else. I just shout out, give a good commendation to Matt Sullivan, the community planner, who has done all this pulling information and data together. And what's missing here is the final number, so that's the last piece that's tied all together. And we'll see that before.
This one, I had to do two cheers. Two cheers for this. Because I'm doing
Having small, without,
Well,
that's emphasized.
and that's why our plan has to say, intro, you must have infrastructure with gas. It makes no sense. I thank all of you for the charter review attention and at this late hour.
Thank you, Joe, for your work and motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nellie.
You're welcome. Really quick reminder,
Yes.
if everyone can please respond to let me know about July 1st.
Well, about July 1st.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, just can everybody make a Tuesday
Yeah.
HHHS meeting instead of on July 1st, instead of.
Can we do it reverse? Is there anybody who can't make it? Worst, JD.
I have no idea.
Okay, we're good then. Thank you, Nellie.